Thank you. So a very good afternoon. I'll speak to you about the 4 different types of diet, just some basic introduction and how to choose and the pros and cons of the diet. So basically this is my agenda. We'll just move in directly. So we know that there are 4 main types of ketogenic diet, which is the classical ketogenic diet, the medium chain triglyceride, also known as the MCT, KD, the modified Atkins diet, and a low glycemic index therapy. I've experienced with the first 3 diets and none with the last, but I've quoted some studies on behalf. So we'll start off with the classical ketogenic diet, which was first introduced by Wilder in 1923. Essentially, a classical KD means either a 4:1 ratio or even a 3:1 ratio. So what does this ratio mean? It means simply 4 grams of fat and 1 gram of protein and carbohydrate. You can see that the fat composition is, the fat composition is extremely high at about 90% of the diet. And who suits this diet? Essentially, it's infants and children because they're probably not exposed to other different types of diet compared to children and adolescents. And therefore, this is probably more suitable for them. But remember that often young infants less than a year old, most of us would admit them for initiation and monitoring because you want to monitor for side effects and tolerability. This is just a paper quoting the efficacy of the classical ketogenic diet in drug-resistant epilepsy. Approximately, I think this is a quote that most of us use in our practice. 56% of them have more than 50% seizure reduction, about 32%, 90% seizure reduction, and 16% seizure freedom. And that's a big amount. We'll start off with a case scenario. This is one of my patients. That's a classical infantile spasms and asymmetric spasms that occur in cluster. The EEG above shows you a highly chaotic background, and the etiology of this child is a severe hypoxic ischemic injury. So at present, he's 2 years old. He had a severe hypoxic ischemic injury and required multiple anti-seizure medication during his neonatal period. He had seizures at 1 hour of life, subsequently developed infantile spasms. So these are our frequent customers with regards to the diet. And he was refractory to our first and second line. So in our country, we use steroids first if you are non-tuberous sclerosis, followed by vigabatrin. And we're quickly enrolling patient into the diet because it's highly efficacious. So we initially started him inpatient with a diet of 2.5 to 1 ratio. He had very good ketones. We discharged him. And at 1 month, he had 50% seizure reduction. And at 3 months, we decided he still had some amount of seizure. We decided to go up on the ratio. And at 3 months, he became seizure-free. But unfortunately, at 9 months, he developed some amount of diarrhea and the mother decided to take him off the diet. But lucky for us, he remains seizure-free. But because of the underlying etiology of severe HIE, he remains severely delayed. So an example of how the diet helps, especially with infantile spasms. And this is an example of the use of classical ketogenic diet in a very young infant that you want to suppress seizures quickly. The next case is a case of a super refractory status epilepticus. 5 years is one of my favorite area of interest. The first video shows you a girl having a perioral twitching, followed by if the video plays, followed by left-sided tonic-clonic, and it becomes a generalized seizure. The second picture essentially highlights a child that's just lying down and not doing anything. But look at the EEG. You can see very florid and angry-looking epileptiform discharges from the left hemisphere, very quickly within seconds migrating to the right hemisphere and becoming generalized. So this is what they call the sparks before the fire. And this patient on an amplitude, this is an amplitude AEG monitoring. Essentially, you're looking at capping, had more than 60 seizures, electrical and electrographic seizures in 24 hours. Serial imaging, including CT and MR, showed she had a severe hypoxic ischemic injury. In the case of 5 years, we managed them with a multimodal approach. Now, the red line depicts the number of seizures over time. You can see this is what we usually do for our patients. They go into the ICU. We start them with midazolam, hypothermia therapy, high doses of phenobarbital, and newer drugs like perampanel. Her seizure responded for a while, but flared up. We also use second-line immunotherapy quite quickly these days. We use tocilizumab. It did not work. She developed a drug reaction and does receive IVIG. Didn't work. Finally decided to start her on the diet only because she lives extremely far and they couldn't comply. And that's why we didn't consider diet earlier. And she became seizure-free. So that's her. She was ventilated for a month, discharged after 2 months with anti-seizure medication and ketogenic diet. At 3 weeks, she became seizure-free, and that's her in our follow-up 3 to 6 months later. You can see she's able to reach, she's able to smile, and she's actually trying to act cute. So yeah. So that's another use of the classical ketogenic diet therapy in a case of super refractory status epilepticus in the ICU. We not only use enteral feeding, but we also use IV ketogenic diet for those who do not tolerate the oral ketogenic diet. So who will be best suited for the classical KD? I think young infants and children less than 2 years of age, those who are enterally fed or tube fed. They're extremely easy because you just need to concoct a special formula. Acute conditions, like I stated before, super refractory status epilepticus. Other frequent customers are those with early infantile epileptic encephalopathy. We get quite a bit of this, infantile spasms, migrating partial seizure of infancy 5 years, and post-epilepsy surgery. So I've had about 3 or 4 patients who underwent epilepsy surgery, either hemispherotomy or tuberectomy or a lesionectomy. But they come back and the surgery is complete, but they get a flare of seizure. So you can't stop them with anti-epileptic drugs. We tried them with the diet, and within days, they become seizure-free. So I think it's the diet, but the other neurologists will say it's probably a flare of seizures post-surgery. We don't know. The pros and cons, I think the classical KD, the pros are probably if you initiate it as inpatient, then you're able to titrate the ratio very fast. In fact, we do it on a daily basis. So 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, and you get to send them back faster. You achieve good ketosis. You get to dampen seizures fast if they're effective. But the cons is it's extremely restrictive diet. There's very limited carbohydrate and protein and a very small proportion of size. And it requires the food to be weighed. There are case reports, but very rare, causing hypoproteinemia and growth problems. And it can cause long-term side effects of kidney stones, poor growth, acidosis, weight loss, and hyperlipidemia. We move on to the second type of ketogenic diet, which is the MCT-KD. This is probably one of my favorite because it's easy to be done, but it can be expensive because the MCT oil is expensive. So the MCT-KD was introduced in 1950s. I think Dr. Nathan had said this. It contains mostly C8 and C10 fatty acids. Now, the thing about MCT-KD is it yields more ketones per kilocalorie of energy compared to your long-chain triglycerides in your classical ketogenic diet. And for that reasons, you get to reduce your amount of fat and be a little bit more liberal with your carbohydrates. So you can see that your amount of fat has come down from 90 in the classical to about 73% here. And they're a bit more liberal with regards to the carbohydrate and protein. It is more favorable, not too sure. More palatable, not too sure, because the food becomes very oily. Some of them complain. But it is extremely easy to be administered as outpatient. They do not have to be admitted. But this is the biggest drawback, I think, is the stomach bloating, diarrhea, and sometimes it can also cause throat irritation. This is just to show you the difference in the efficacy of the MCT-KD versus the classical KD. This shows you a seizure reduction, and I think there was not much difference. That's what the authors were trying to depict, that there was not much difference between the classical and the MCT-KD at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months of initiation. But because of the side effects of abdominal discomfort and bloating, the diet was not widely acceptable. So this is a case scenario. This is a 8-year, 11-month-old boy with a history of neonatal hypoglycemia. And most of you know how terrible hypoglycemias can be. They're probably one of the worst seizures to control. He started having seizures at the age of 9 months with multiple seizure types, with spasms, myoclonic seizure, focal seizure. Eventually went into Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, where he started having daily drop attacks and tonic seizures, and his minor seizures were atypical absences. What I'm trying to show you on the EEG is his EEG showed clear discharges coming from the left parietal occipital quadrant, which was concordant with the MR showing you a gliotic lesion and a hypometabolic region over the right, sorry, not left, right parietal occipital region. So he was a good surgical candidate. They were counsel for the epilepsy surgery of a right parietal occipital disconnection. Parents refused. Counsel for the vagal nerve stimulation refused. They decided to try on the diet. So you can see at onset, he had 60 major seizures and 150 minor seizures. And within a month, with just 20% MCT, there was more than 50% reduction of seizure. What's more impressive is when we went up on the amount to 45% MCT, the seizures came down a bit more, but he could not tolerate 45%. He developed diarrhea. So the parents have been adjusting the MCT on their own. And at this point, when they retried him on 45% MCT, he actually had seizure freedom for about 2 to 3 months. But unfortunately, he developed diarrhea again. So parents are extremely happy because you look at the drastic reduction in seizures. And not only that, he's got a lot more improvement with his current status. You look at him. This was a child. Okay, this was a child who was not able to speak previously, who was ataxic when he walked and could not feed himself. So he's improved tremendously in his activities of daily living. And so parents are happy. They still do not want to consider epilepsy surgery, even though I think that's the way forward. So this is a case to exemplify that MCT-KD is as useful as the classical KD, but you need to be very careful with regards to side effects. So who will be best suited for the MCT-KD? I think there are children and adolescents who have already started taking a lot of different kinds of food and those who prefer a high carbohydrate intake. But those who are able to incorporate the MCT in their food, drinks, and snacks. What is the pros and the cons of the MCT-KD? I think the pros is it allows a higher carbohydrate and protein intake. The diet can be a bit more varied compared to the classical KD, and it's extremely easy to administer. Unfortunately, the cons include bloating, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and some patients complain about throat irritation, especially with the oil. And we also have MCT powder in our country, and that also can cause some throat irritation. We move on to the modified Atkins diet. So this was a diet highly popularized by celebrities for weight loss, but we know we use it for the use of refractory epilepsy. It's more palatable and less restrictive. Again, you can see that the amount of fat is about 65%. They're a lot more liberal with the amount of protein, but the problem is your carbohydrates are very low. So there is no limitation on protein, fluids, or calories, making meal planning easier. You do not need hospitalization once again. I think it's most useful in adolescents and especially in adults for self-administration. It's also probably better tolerated and accepted. When you look at the efficacy between the modified Atkins and the classical diet, Alvin showed that the classical KD was probably better. This shows the mean percentage of baseline seizure reduction. So the seizure reduction was probably much higher in the classical compared to the MAD, but not very significant. But what I think is more important to understand is I think the classical KD is a better option for the younger children compared to the older ones. So this is a case illustration, a girl 9 years, 6 months with tuberous sclerosis complex. We talk about how the diet is very useful in tuberous sclerosis complex. She was worked up for epilepsy surgery when she was much younger. And, the EEG and MR was concordant to the left parietal occipital region. And she underwent a lesionectomy in 2020, but there was no difference in her seizure outcome. She continued to have daily asymmetric tonic seizures. Parents decided they needed another option because she was refractory to drugs and she was started on the modified Atkins. And just within 6 months of the diet, she has more than 90% seizure reduction. In fact, the seizures are extremely subtle. Once again, this was almost a moribund child, bedbound, required a wheelchair. And today she's walking. I don't have her videos. She's walking. She's able to speak much better and she attends a special school. So the diet improves not just your seizure outcomes, but in your overall well-being as well. So who will be best suited for the modified Atkins? I think adolescents and adults who prefer a less restrictive diet, and also those who are able to read labels, who are able to design their own meals from food choices given. The pros of a modified Atkins diet is there's no restriction on protein intake. Again, very easy to initiate as outpatient, easy for self-administration. You do not need to weigh food. We use a macronutrient exchange system. Probably the dietitians will teach you, and it's well tolerated. The only cons is that there is very restricted carbohydrate intake. Last but not least is the low glycemic index therapy. Also introduced in 2005, where extreme carbohydrate restriction is now liberalized. So high carbohydrate containing food are restricted to low glycemic index food, which produces a relatively small change in the blood sugar. The total carbohydrate intake is approximately 40 to 60 grams, but they prefer food with a low glycemic index of less than 50. It's more palatable, easier to implement, and there are reports of the use of diet in children with Angelman syndrome. This is a paper published in 2009 looking at the efficacy of LGIT. And there were 76 patients with drug-resistant epilepsy. And what they looked at was a 50% seizure reduction, which continued to rise exponentially as time progressed. And I think in this paper, which was published in 2021, they looked at the use of low glycemic index plus anti-seizure medication versus a control group that only received anti-seizure medication. And they found that those on a combination of anti-seizure medication and low glycemic index at 3 months, what they were looking at is more than 50% reduction. About 30% of them had more than 50% seizure reduction, none in the control group, good overall compliance of 88%, and no serious side effects. Who will be best suited? Probably adolescents and adults. I don't have much experience. And the pros and cons, I think they allow a generous protein allowance. Protein, fat, and calories are monitored, but not as strictly as the ketogenic diet. And it also has other health benefits. But despite allowing a higher carbohydrate intake, they have to be at a lower glycemic index. So that's probably the only cons of the diet. So I think this is just a table to show you the different composition of the 4 different diets that we spoke about. And you can see that the total fat content of the classical ketogenic diet is extremely high and your protein carbohydrate content is low. This is followed by the MCT and MAD with 70% of the diet comprising of fat, but a little bit more liberal with regards to the carbohydrate and protein in MCT-KD. In MAD, the protein is liberal, but the carbohydrate is still restricted. So despite small differences, all diets have almost similar efficacy and majority of patients have at least 50% reduction. So I conclude by saying that, over a bowl of pho that Dr. Tu brought us around and a cup of Vietnamese coffee, this is what I learned from the rest of them yesterday, that there's no one diet that suits all patients. I think age group may be a pivotal point in choosing your diet. Essentially, I think it all depends on the compliance, the efficacy, and the side effect profile of the diet to a patient. And often minor tweaks, sometimes switching from one diet to another. And occasionally a hybrid. Sometimes we do that. A hybrid meaning, a classical plus an MCT versions of the diet may be helpful. Last but not least, thank you very much. I think the most important person would be Dr. Nathan for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful team. And Dr. Tu, you're hiding somewhere. I don't know where you are, but you've been a great host. And thank you very much to the organizing committee for the wonderful dinner last night. So thank you very much.
So once you decide what you're going to give and which diet you're going to give, you then got to know how you're going to give it. You'll say, we'll just give it in a plate and they have to eat it with a fork and spoon, with the chopsticks or with their fingers. But what about those who can't do this, who are on tube feeds, the children who can't chew? Many of them can't chew, even at the age of 1, 1.5, 2. We have some children even at 2.5 and 3, they can't chew. So you got to then blenderize the diet. So Sakina, who is the dietitian working with Sumita and has a lot of experience in this, is now going to tell you how to give the diet in children who have difficulties in either swallowing or difficulties in chewing, and those who are on NG tube feeding. Yeah, come.
Hi, Assalamualaikum, and very good afternoon to everyone. First and foremost, I would like to have this opportunity to say thank you very much to Dr. Nathan for inviting me, and also as well as Dr. You and Dr. Tu, okay, for the hosting, and also for the warm welcome from the Vietnamese people, and also for the delicious food here. Very, very delicious. Okay. All right. So I'm dietitian Sakina. Same hospital with Dr. Sumita. I'll be talking about enteral nutrition, blenderized keto, and as well as parenteral ketogenic diet. So let's start. Okay, these are the three main topics I will talk about: the enteral nutrition feeding tube, blenderized keto or mixed with the formula, recommendation for parenteral keto, as well as the take-home message. All right, we start with enteral feeding of ketogenic diet. Okay, so when to use enteral feeding of ketogenic diet? A ketogenic enteral feed can be used for existing tube-fed patients who are to be initiated on ketogenic diet therapy, and is very suitable for those who are who is planned for classical KD, and it is also doable for MCT KD. All right, or for patients already established on ketogenic dietary therapy who subsequently required tube feeding. Oral intake and enteral feeding ketogenic diet will be used when oral intake is not possible, like Dr. Nathan mentioned just now, due to medical condition such as swallowing incoordination. All right, maybe used as supplement if oral intake inadequate, resulting from physical or behavioral eating problems. All right, these are the common enteral feeding route. I won't explain further. It's just nasogastric tube for short-term use, gastrostomy tube for longer-term use, as well as, and it also possible to feed directly into the duodenum or jejunum. And the most suitable one is the continuously feeding for geniostomy. Right. Okay, so pre-diet assessment. Before you start enteral ketogenic diet, you must assess the patient, whether it can be done by the dietitian, nutritionist, or maybe the physician, the neurologist. Okay, prior to commencement of enteral feeding, we assess the current and past growth, their weight, height, okay, the current nutritional intake, route of feeding, bowel function. Okay, if it is good to start enteral nutrition, and scope for inclusion of oral feed, and whether swallow has been adequately assessed by the speech therapist. And also baseline ketogenic blood biochemistry results such as lipid profile, uric acid, right? Okay, so all this consideration is actually very, very important for dietitian to calculate and plan the appropriate ketogenic feeding regime. Okay, so what type of enteral nutrition? It could be commercial ketogenic formula. It could be homemade blended ketogenic formula. Also, or combination of these two, all right? Commercial ketogenic formula mixed with homemade blended food. Okay. All right. So commercial ketogenic formula, we have few. Okay. Later, I will show you the picture and description. So it can be used for oral and enteral nutrition. It can be some of it is in a liquid form and ready to feed, ready to drink, such as this Ketonia is in liquid form. It is from Korea. And also RCF, but this one need to be added with water because it's too concentrated. And this commercial ketogenic formula available, all available commercial ketogenic formula contain dairies. It contains dairies, so it's not suitable for those who are CMPA, epilepsy with CMPA maybe. But here the RCF is actually soy-based formula. Right, it can be used for CMPA patient. And commercial ketogenic formula can be combined with modular formula as to alter, for example, to alter the ratio and also improve the protein content. Okay, so for infant, so it can be designed by the daily or bottle feed, the individual bottle feed. All right, it must be calculated and provided to the caretaker, and combination of current infant formula, whatever infant formula that they are using now, can mix with commercial ketogenic formula just to the calculation to make up the ratio. And what about the breastfeeding infant? The breast milk is actually safe to be mixed with the commercial ketogenic formula to enhance the ratio. It is safe, okay? All right. So these are the available commercial ketogenic formula that I know. Okay, that I know. So the KetoCal, okay, we don't have it in Malaysia because it's too expensive. I would say it's expensive, and it was agreed by Dr. Omnia and Sonal and Juga and every two. Okay, so it has two formulas. It has 3:1 ratio and also 4:1 ratio. The 3:1 ratio is more for suitable from since birth to 3-year-old, and for KetoCal, 4:1 ratio is suitable from 1 year plus, and maybe used for supplementary feeding over the age of 10-year-old, and the origin is from the US. And this one is a liquid form. This is the powder form. You have to. This is a powder form. And this one is the liquid form, and it comes with a straw. You can drink like that. Okay, it's very, very convenient for the patient. Some of our patients use it as a supplement, and suitable for infant and young children. It comes in liquid form and ready to drink. No need to mix with other food content or water. Or sometimes we mix with modular formula to alter the ratio and to meet the calorie requirement, and it is nutritional complete. We import this from Korea. Okay, so this is Ketovi. We also don't have this in Malaysia, but some sample has been given to us, and we give to patient, and it's very tasty, especially the chocolate one, of course, because the children love chocolate. All right, okay, and it's good because it has a variety range of flavor. It has chocolate. It has and flavor is a vanilla. Yeah, it also have peptide base, all right, peptide base formula form 1 for those who has GI issue, all right. It's also, the new one is a plant-based protein vanilla, which I think suitable for CMPA, right. The origin is from the UK, and this one I'm very proud to say that this is from our Malaysia. This is produced locally. Luckily we have this one. It is formulated at 3:1 ratio. It's a complete nutritional drink. It's in powder form. The Ketovi just now is in liquid form. This one. Okay, this is in liquid form, and this is in powder form. It's from Malaysia. It's a formula blend with healthy fats, MCT, and also long chain fatty acid. Right? It's also lactose free and high soluble fiber. And this two is not actually the commercial formula for ketogenic diet, mainly for inborn error metabolism disease. All right, but we can also modulate this into ketogenic diet because it has very, very low in carbohydrate. And this one make up to 2:1 ratio, while this one make up to 1.8 to 1 ratio. You can modulate this, you can incorporate this into a ketogenic diet. And yeah, you can see here the carbohydrate is very low, it's 0.01 gram carbohydrate in 100 ml. And it's suitable for 0 to 12 months, and also suitable for cow's milk protein allergy. And this one, RCF, we use a lot. We use these two, aside from the ketonia just now, this one from US, and yeah, it's also can incorporate in ketogenic diet. So modular formula. So fat modular or protein modular can be mixed with elemental formula, semi-elemental formula, or even standard formula to alter the ratio and also improve the protein. When to use modular formula? When the commercial ketogenic diet not available. And for those who has maybe GI problems, CMPA, or unable to tolerate dairy or soy. Okay. And we can use this one as a base. This is example to how to design the modular formula. First, you use the formula, whether the elemental, standard, or semi-elemental formula as a base. Then you add fat modular, whether you use MCT oil, and another long chain fatty acid, any veggie oil, and you add protein as needed. Okay, you can use protein powder or liquid protein, the modular, and you calculate the micronutrient and provide supplementation as needed. Okay, so these are the formula, the modular formula. This is the MCT oil we use in Malaysia. I think here also got MCT oil, maybe different brand. So this one is quite new. MCT powder we have in Malaysia, the same company with the one Active Med Keto, and very, very helpful for those patients who cannot tolerate the liquid form. Yeah, very, very helpful, and it can be cooked as gravies. This is a protein formula, and also this is not the modular formula, but we use a lot to as a source of essential fatty acid. So this is the example of modular formula using semi-elemental. So this is the brand. I use this peptamine plus myotin protein powder plus veggie oil for essential fatty acid plus MCT oil, and to make up this ratio and nutritions. Okay. All right. So possible effects, side effects of mental nutrition ketogenic diet. It is actually similar to those you see in the oral diet, and it can be monitored in the same way as one taken orally. All right. Maybe you want to focus more on those who are constipated or those who are worsening of any pre-existing gas GI reflux. Okay, now we go to blenderized keto food or mixed with formula. Okay, when to use a blenderized formula? When patient unable to tolerate with dairy and soy product, such as multiple food allergies or digestive issue that resulted from the commercial formula, the blenderized formula can be prepared using whole food or mixed with modular formula. And it is as a backup formula when commercial product is not available. Okay, how to prepare a blenderized formula? So blenderized formula should be prepared fresh each day. You can prepare for 1 day usage, then you can keep in the fridge and use within 24 hours. And the next day you make a new one. Okay, because it's to prevent the bacterial contamination. And it's not suitable for continuous feeding because continuous feeding need longer hanging time, right? Okay, we don't want the bacteria to start contaminated. And then it can be calculated as one daily recipe or individual meal or bolus. If using powder formula, it may require blending or straining to remove clump, because if you use if you want to mix with powder formula, and when we use powder formula, we mix with warm water, sometimes it can cause small clumps. Okay, you need to dissolve everything, so you need to strain, okay, to make up if more smooth to go through the nasogastric tube. And solid food, when you use solid food, it requires high-powered blender to provide a smooth formulation to go through NG or gastro tube. We don't want to make the tube block somewhere. Okay, so this is the example of blenderized formula. Okay, the most convenient one, you use the commercial infant formula, the one in puree form. Okay, you take the puree form and you mix with fat modular or vegetable oil to alter the ratio, and add protein modular to improve protein content, and water. That's all. That's it. Very, very convenient. Okay, the second example, you can blender the mix unsweetened almond milk or unsweetened soy milk plus flaxseed oil plus chicken or fish, carrot, and add fat modular. This must be added in the formula. Okay, these are the example of daily recipe blenderized formula. Okay, this one is the real example from my patient. I give this daily requirement with the measurement, and this is the suggestion for lunch and dinner, and this is suggestion for the breakfast. So, recommendation for parental ketogenic diet. And this one, parental ketogenic diet, actually reserved to those who are unable to tolerate enteral nutrition, and also those who are having GI problem. Okay, so this recommendation is from a group, a reviewable group in 2019. You can get the paper. I give the reference later. So the first one, ketogenic parental nutrition should be started in intensive care unit or for emergency situation only. In general, indication, contraindication, same as enteral ketogenic diet. Start ketogenic diet parenteral nutrition exclusively in case patient is planned for NBM more than 48 hours. All right. And you have to carefully evaluate the medical and nutritional status whether patient is infant, born, preterm, malnourished children, because these two very high risk of complication and not suitable to start KDPN. Okay, so change all medication to non-carbohydrate form. The carbohydrate and alcohol content of IV product should be calculated. All right. Additional fasting can be performed at KD initiation if needed. Okay, for a maximum 24 hours to induce ketosis for the first time. For fluid, determine the net fluid volume. Use the holiday Segar method. And for the calories, start with 50% of goal and build up with maximum 1 week when lipids increase, and aim for the calorie, the REE or 70 or 80% of calculated energy requirement. For carbohydrate, use glucose dextrose might avoided for 3 to 4 days of KDPN initiation to benefit ketosis. For protein, 100% requirement and 0.5, 0.8 kilogram per kilo per day is accepted. During critical illness, maybe need additional protein to promote positive nitrogen balance. For lipids, start with 50% of goal lipid or 1 to 2 gram per kilo per day, and lipid increase every 1 to 2 days up to maximum 4 gram per kilo per day, and run lipid continuously. For the diet ratio, you can start at 1-to-1 ratio and increase every 1 to 2 days to the highest ratio possible with the lower complication, and 4-to-1 or 3-1 ratio within 3 to 4 days. And KDPN initiation during prophylactic anesthesia is not recommended and should be undertaken only with caution. Transition to enteral nutrition need to be tailored accordingly. Start tropic feeding as soon as possible and appropriate. Okay, now the take-home message, the last session. Children with enteral feeding tubes are excellent candidate for KD therapy due to the consistency and compliance and ease of diet preparation. Selection of the appropriate formula. The nutritional composition of a formula should also be evaluated to meet the micro and macronutrient needs of an individual. Blenderized diet is possible to implement whenever limitation supply of commercial formula. However, supplementation of vitamin and mineral is needed. And with that, these are the reference you can, I put in a slide so that you can go and do the reading further. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nosakina. When I hear your presentation, I see many ketogenic formula. Yeah. And I want to know, in your country, it's very easy to find it. In my country, we don't have ketogenic formula for the patient. How about your country?
Thank you for the question. Okay, for many years ago, we don't have ketogenic formula produced locally. We need to import the ketogenic formula from the outside, from the other country. Just now I mentioned Ketonia from the Korea, the one we use for many years already. We import from the Korea. The shipping is about 3 weeks like that. We need to pre-order first how many cartons we need to the supplier, then they bring in, and as well as the RCF just now in the liquid form. And just few years back, I think 3 years ago, the local company has produced one ketogenic formula in powder form, 3-1 ratio, and also MCT powder. We are so lucky to have them to challenge themselves to produce local formula. I heard that you guys have this keto kit 3-1 ratio. I think it's good enough to have one to start with. Yeah.
Chúng ta vừa nghe phần trình bày về các cái sản phẩm chế độ ăn sinh ceton mà dành cho những trường hợp đặc biệt trẻ khó nuốt hoặc là những sản phẩm truyền dịch, thì rõ ràng là một mơ ước cho những cái công tác thực hành của chúng ta. Cô Nosakina là một chuyên gia về dinh dưỡng của Malaysia. và cái phần trình bày của cô cho chúng ta những cái suy nghĩ là sẽ cố gắng làm sao để có nhiều cái sản phẩm liên quan đến sử dụng cho bệnh nhân. Now I want to introduce next topic from Dr. Sona. Yes. Cô Sonan sẽ chia sẻ với chúng ta về cách tính toán các cái chế độ ăn sinh ceton. I would like to invite you to show your presentation now.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So Sonal Bailur has worked with me for a long time. She's a very good dietitian, always thinking about new avenues and new ways to use the diet. And I have great pleasure in her taking one of the difficult topics, calculating the ketogenic diet. Sonal.
A very good afternoon to all of you. First, I would like to thank Dr. Nathan for such a lovely introduction. And I also like to thank the ILAE, Dr. Nathan, and the director of the Nidong Hospital for inviting me as a speaker. Dr. Hugh and Dr. Thu, thank you for hosting and organizing such a lovely workshop and for the wonderful dinner. So the topic that I'll be speaking now is classical ketogenic diet, calculations and exam. So what are the basic steps to calculating the classical ketogenic diet? We first assess the patient's calorie needs. We also assess the protein needs. With this, we determine the appropriate ketogenic ratio. And then last, we proceed with the calculation of the diet. So the variables that we consider before calculating the classical ketogenic diet, we take the patient's anthropometric measurements like their height and their weight. And with this, we calculate their ideal body weight. We also take a 24-hour recall of the patient's actual intake before initiating the ketogenic diet. With this, we can assess the patient's appetite and also their daily calorie consumption. We do not follow the fasting protocol at our center. We start a patient on pre-KD carbohydrate washout diet, where less than 5 grams of carbohydrates is given in the entire day, and protein and fat is given ad libitum till the time the patient achieves optimal 4+ urine ketones. We take a 24-hour recall of the washout diet as well. We then calculate the ideal calories, and this is based on the 75% of the recommended dietary allowance. We also refer to the keto exchange list when we do the calculation. So this is a list of the nutritive values of 100 grams of commonly used food items in ketogenic diet. Next, we decide the ratio, and before that, we need to know what is exactly ketogenic ratio. So this is the ratio of the grams of fats to the grams of protein plus carbohydrate combined. So for example, in a ratio of 2:1, we give 2 grams of fats to 1 gram of protein plus carbohydrate combined. So we all know that 1 gram of fat gives us 9 kilocalories and 1 gram of protein and carbohydrates gives us 4 kilocalories each. Next, we decide the keto ratio, and this is done on the basis of their age. So any patients between the age group of 0 to 3 years, we begin them on 2:1 keto ratio. And any patients about 3 years of age, we begin them on 2.5:1 keto ratio. We proceed with a case study of a patient's keto diet calculation. This is one of our patients. So the age group was 7 years. We took the patient's anthropometric measurements, that is height and weight, and we calculated the ideal body weight. So we did this on the basis of the 50th percentile of the IAP standards. So IAP stands for Indian Academy of Pediatrics. So at our center, we use IAP growth charts for any patients above 5 years of age, and any patients who are below 5 years of age, we use the ICMR growth charts, which stands for Indian Council of Medical Research. So you'll have to use the growth charts of Vietnam's norms mainly. Next, we proceed with the ideal calories. So 75% of the RDA, multiply that with the ideal body weight. So the 7 years female 75% RDA is 56 kilocalories, and we multiply that with her ideal body weight, which is 21. So we get the value 1176 kilocalories. Next, we proceed with the total keto calories. So we decide this on the basis of whether the patient is overweight or underweight. And then we reduce or increase the calories by 100 respectively, because we know scientifically that reducing or increasing 100 kilocalories will in turn reduce or increase 1 kg in a month in a safe manner. So in this case, the patient is 1 kg overweight. So we'll reduce the calories by 100 So now the total calories is 1076 kilocalories. Next, we proceed with the diet unit quotient. So the keto ratio here is 2:1, and we know that 1 gram of fat gives us 9 kilocalories. So 9 multiplied by 2 gives you 18. Okay, and we know that 1 gram of carbohydrate plus protein combined gives us 4 kilocalories. So 1 multiplied by 4 will again give you 4. So we do the addition, that is 18 plus 4, which gives you 22. So that's the diet unit quotient. Next is the diet unit composition. So we take the total calories per day, which is 1076, and we divide that by the DUQ value, that is 22, and the value that we get is 48.9. We proceed with the macronutrient calculation for the entire day. First, we start with the fat allowance. So we take the DUC value, that is 48.9, and multiply that with the number of fat units in the given ratio, which is 2, right? So the value that you get is 97.8 grams. The carbohydrate plus protein allowance combined. So again, DUC value and multiply that with the number of carbohydrate plus protein units in the given ratio. So 48.9 multiplied by 1 gives you again 48.9. So we have to decide how much allowance you'll keep for protein and how much for carbohydrates. So we do this on the basis of the WHO protein requirement, and this is on the basis of the age, right? So you can see that this patient is in the age group of 3 to 12 years, right? And that's 1.5 grams per kg ideal body weight. So you can see here, so 1.5 multiplied by the patient's ideal body weight, which is 21, and the value that you get is 31 grams. So this is the entire day protein allowance for this patient. For the carbohydrate allowance, all you have to do is subtract the protein from the total carbohydrate plus protein allowance. So 31 minus 48.9, which you got over here, the value that you get is 17.9 grams. So this is again the per day allowance of the carbohydrates. For this patient, we decided for 4 meals in the entire day, right? So this is a table where you can see the per day allowance of the macronutrients and then the per meal allowance of the macronutrients, right? So all you have to do is you have to divide the values by 4. So fat, 97.8 divided by 4, you get 24.45. 31 divided by 4 gives you 7.75, and 17.9 divided by 4 gives you 4.47. Okay. Once you do this calculation, you need to make sure that all your calculations are accurate. So how do you do that? You have to recheck the ratio, right? So you take the per meal fat value, that is 24.45 here, and you divide that with the carbohydrate plus protein value, per meal value. So 7.75 plus 4.47 gives you 12.22. So 24.45 divided by 12.22 is 2. This is the value that you get. So you know that your calculation is correct. Okay. So now we proceed with the recipe calculation. So the one that you see here is fruit milkshake. Pretty easy to do. You have 1 protein source, 1 carbohydrate source, and 1 fat source. Okay. So we are using Sofit unsweetened soya milk. This is a brand of soya milk which is commonly available in India. And we use the unsweetened version because we need to use a sugar-free version in keto diet. We're using fruit A or fruit B. Now, mainly at our center, we have divided the fruits into 2 categories on the basis of the carb intake, which I'll be explaining later. Okay, so I can explain it right now. Okay, so this is the exchange list for fruits. So it's on the basis of the carbohydrate content. So the fruit A has about 10 grams of fruits, 10 grams of carbohydrates, and fruit B has 15 grams of carbohydrates per 100 grams. Okay, so fruit B is 2/3 of fruit A. So we give this list to all our patients. So it's easy for them to choose whichever fruits they want from the list. So the thumb rule when you do the calculation is also always to first begin with the carbohydrates. So you have the per meal values here. So for the carbohydrates, it is 4.47, right? So we just have to do the cross multiplication. If 100 grams of fruit A gives you 10 grams of carbohydrates, then how much amount will give you 4.47? So the answer that you get is 45 grams, okay? Once you get the amount, obviously you have to also calculate for the protein as fruit doesn't have any fat. So the value that you get here is 0.45. Okay. Next, please proceed with the protein calculation. So first, we need around 7.75 grams of protein, and we first have to subtract the protein from the fruit value, that is 0.45. So 7.75 minus 0.45 you get 7.30. Okay. So we need, to take that amount from soya milk, right? So again, we do the cross multiplication. If 100 grams of soya milk gives us 3.2 grams of protein, then how much amount will give you 7.30? So the answer that you get is 228 grams. Okay. As you can see here, we have not mentioned the carbohydrate amount for the soya milk because it doesn't get absorbed in the body. So we do not consider the carb value for any soy products. Once you do the protein calculation, we know that soya milk also has fat. So again, you have to do the, the calculation for that, and you get 3.64. Next, we proceed with calculating the fat. Okay, so we need 24.45 grams of fat. Okay, we already have from the soya milk, that is 3.64. So you have to subtract that first, that is 24.45 minus 3.64. Okay, so you get 20.9. Okay, so we need around 21 grams from the source of fat, that is oil, ghee, or butter, right? So we know that 100 grams of oil, ghee gives you 100 grams of fat. So directly you take the value 21, okay, 21 grams. And then you do the addition of this and you get 24.61. Okay, you have to calculate the butter value separately because we know that 100 grams of butter gives you 81 grams of fat. So the value that you will do once you do the cross multiplication is 26 grams. So mainly this is the entire calculation you can see over here. Okay, we have done the carbohydrate calculation, the protein and the fat, right? Once you do this, again, you have to recheck the ratio because you're doing all the calculations manually. So errors can take place, right? So again, you have to divide the carb value that you have got here and divide that with the protein plus fat value. We take the fat value and we divide that with the carbohydrate plus protein value. So the fat value is 24.61 and the carb value is 4.5 plus 7.74. When you divide that, you get the value 2. So we know that this calculation is correct. As you can see, I just explained about fruit milkshake, right? So with the same ingredients, you can make different recipes because you need to give a variety to the patients. So you can make a fruit milkshake. Okay. You can also, if they don't like fruit milkshake, they can just have plain, fruit and milk, and you can add the oil or the butter in the milk itself. Okay. You can also chop the fruits and make like a fruit salad. Okay. And you can also make a panna cotta. So you can add gelatin or china grass and make like a pudding for the patient. Next recipe that I'll be explaining is chicken noodles. Okay, so I think all Vietnamese like noodles. So we are using miracle rice or shirataki noodles. So this is made from konjac flour, and this has very negligible. I think it has no digestible carbohydrates, so it's not absorbed by the body, and the glucose will not spike. And you can take as much amount as a patient requires. Okay, so there's no calories at all. So here, the carbohydrate source is vegetables, okay? The protein source is chicken, and the fat source is oil, ghee, or butter. Again, as I just explained earlier, we'll be first calculating the carbohydrates. So we know the carb value here, the allowance that we have per meal is 4.47. Okay, so we all again do the cross multiplication. Now you can see for vegetables also, we have grouped them into two categories, A and B. Okay, so this is also again on the basis of the carb content. So A group has all the vegetables which have about 4 grams of carbohydrate per 100 grams, and vegetable B have 8 grams of carbohydrates per 100 grams. Okay, so vegetable B is half of vegetable A. So mainly you do again the cross multiplication. Okay, so if 100 grams of vegetable A gives you 4 grams of carbohydrates, how much will give you 4.47? So the cross multiplication, you get the value 112. Okay, when you do that, again, we know that vegetables also have protein. So 100 grams gives you about 1 gram of protein. So 112 will give you 1.12. It doesn't have any fats. We haven't mentioned anything here. For, again, B, all you have to do is just divide the 112 by 2. So you get 56. Okay, so this carb calculation has been completed. Next, we proceed with the protein calculation. So the protein source is chicken. Okay, so you first have to subtract the protein value from the vegetables. for the meal value for the protein, that is 7.75 minus 1.12, that you get 6.58. And then we again do the cross multiplication. So 100 grams of chicken gives you 23.5 grams of protein. So 6.58 gives you about 28 grams of chicken. Okay. And also gives you 0.22 grams of fat. So you just do the addition, 6.58 plus 1.12. The value that you get is 7.70. Okay, so your protein calculation is also done. Last is the fat calculation. So again, you just have to do the addition because chicken has fat value of 0.22. So you first have to subtract the 24.45 from the 0.22 and you get the value around 24. So you just directly take the value 24 because we again know that 100 grams of fat gives you, 100 grams of oil gives you 100 grams of fat. So 24 plus 0.22 gives you 24.22. Okay. And last, again, you can see I do the ratio check for each recipes. Okay. You may feel that, that once you do it initially, you don't have to do it later on, but it is required because you do end up making mistakes when you do 30 to 40 recipe calculations for each patient. So as a precautionary measure, I always emphasize that you need to do the ratio check. So the carbohydrate plus protein divided by fat. So 4.48, which you have calculated, plus 7.77 divided by 24.98. So the value that you get is 1.98, which is 2:1. So we know the calculation is correct. Next is, this is just a summary of the calculation with different ratios with the same calories for this patient. Okay. So this is the easier version, which I can show you here. So you can see that as the ratio increases, okay, so we start with 1.5:1, so you have the carb, protein, and the fat values in the entire day. And when the ratio increases, you can see that the fat amount increases gradually and the protein content goes down drastically, right? The fat amount and the carb amount, the fat amount goes up drastically and the carb amount goes down drastically. So protein remains almost the same. Okay. So what are the common dietitian mistakes while calculating the classical ketogenic diet? First is focusing only on calculation and not on the practicality of the recipe plan. So we always have to visualize whether the recipe is feasible to be given to the patient or not. Second is prescribing the recipes with food ingredient amount in decimals. So if you see in my previous calculations, I've not mentioned decimals anywhere, okay, in the amounts. So for example, when you do the calculation, you may get 65.7 grams, but we always round it up. So any amount more than 0.5, we should consider the next value, that is 66 grams here. Okay. Third is using generic food item nutritive values for calculation. So at our center, we do not use the generic items. We always check the branded food items. So I just mentioned SOFIT. So that's a branded food item. And we use the nutritive values, when you do the calculation of the recipes. And last is not rechecking the recipe or the keto ratio calculation. So always recheck to avoid any errors. We also mention free foods for our patients. So this is especially for those who are overweight patients and they are used to eating larger portion size of foods, which we cannot give because we need to make sure they reach their ideal body weight. So the thumb rule here is also never to give the free foods with the recipes, but always give it in between the meals if the patient is ever hungry. So we use sugar-free flavored sharbats. We can use sugar-free sweeteners. We use erythritol. We use stevia. We use monk fruit. Okay. To sweeten the sharbats or the sodas. We also add essence to that. So you can add different flavors like orange or lime. It's available easily. You can also make sugar-free ice candy. Okay, if the patient so desires. You can make gelatin jelly. Okay, or you can also give plain soda. And you can also use lettuce leaves in form of soups or salad. So calorie restriction is always recommended at our center. Okay, because that helps to bring about good seizure control, but we do not recommend any fluid restriction. So fluid allowance can be liberal depending upon the urine routine report, which we ask the patient to do every month, and we inform them to distribute the fluids throughout the day. So one of the indicators where we know whether the patient is drinking adequate amount of liquid is we ask them to check the urine color. It has to be pale yellow in color, So that indicates that they're drinking adequate amount of water. In case if it's very dark yellow, they know that the patient is dehydrated. They have to increase the intake. And similarly, if it is very light colored, then they have to reduce the intake. So they have to adjust it accordingly. So this is a 1-month course that we offer at our center to all our patients, to all dietitians and doctors. So you are, invited for that. You can just check out our website, ketogenicdietindia.org, and you'll get all our contact details, and we welcome you to enroll for the course if you so desire. Thank you. So this is about the classical ketogenic diet. If you have any questions, give me a thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your presentation. In our video, we have some parents with ketogenic diet. They have some experience about this. They can prepare some sample for their child. After that, they share their sample with other parents in a fan base or something like this. How about your opinion? We recommend this. Their parent can share anything for meal for other patients?
No, it is all individualized. The calculations are individualized as per each patient's, the seizure frequency, their height, their weight. So they cannot really share it with the other. They can share the recipes, the ingredients, but the values, the amounts will always change for everyone. So we do not recommend that. So we do have a WhatsApp group where, for the patients mainly, where they can share the recipes, but obviously we always add a disclaimer that they should not use the same, the amounts that are given. So that's for that particular patient mainly. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Sorry? Okay. Okay.
Professor Nathan? Yes.
No, the next step. So now we're going to talk to you about something which makes your life easier. It's known as the keto calculator. But don't begin using the keto calculator. First begin with this. Once you get used to this, then there's an app called the keto calculator. I know you all use apps for everything in life, but please begin with the keto calculator after you have learned how to actually calculate recipes. So the next is on the keto calculator.
Yes. So now I'll be giving you a brief, introduction to how to use a keto calculator. So keto calculator is a tool for calculating the multiple components of the ketogenic diet, including the meals, formulas, nutrition supplements, fluids, and the carbohydrate content of medications. So this program was designed by a very renowned dietitian, Miss Beth Zupekania, in 1997. Okay, and this program was built into a digital format and given the title Keto Calculator, and it's now available for all the dietitians for online use mainly. So this is the web page of the Keto Calculator. Okay, so you have to go on the website ketodietcalculator.org. Okay, so you can see that there is a register button here. Okay, on the upper right side. So you have to click on that first and enter your details. Okay, once you enter your details and you submit it, then Miss Beth will revert back to you within 1 or 2 days with your login ID and password with which you can access the app. So what are the program steps of using the keto calculator? So initial entry of the demographic data, which includes the name, date of birth, desired weight for length and gender of the individual to facilitate the creation of the diet. So first step is estimation of the energy requirements. Second is determination of the individual's protein requirement. Third is determination of the ketogenic ratio. And last is the formulation of the ketogenic meals. So if you want to, enter a new client's data, so you just click here, okay, and enter. So this is just an example. You can see add the first name, the last name. You have to add the date of birth, the gender, and when you're starting the diet. Okay. And you can also add the email address of the caregiver or the patient, and then you save this. Once you save it, then it will be available when you click, when you do the fine tuning or when you have to do the calculation, you can always access it by clicking on the upper left corner, that is select client. So you can choose, there'll be a database of all the client lists that you have saved. Next is determining the calories, keto ratio, and the macronutrient calculation, that is carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Okay, so here you can see you have to add the ideal body weight of the patient that you're calculating the diet for. You decide the calories as well and the keto ratio, and then you also decide the number of meals that you're going to give to the patient. When you do that, then the app will automatically mention the values on a daily and the per meal allowance that you set, but you can make changes if you so require, and then you save it. Once you save it, again, it goes into a database. So whenever you want to refer to it, you can do so over here. Okay. Next is formulation of the keto recipes. So first is you can see on the upper left side, you have the add standard meals. So Beth has already designed certain standard meals with ingredients. So you can just adjust the amounts as per the goals that you have set for your patient. Or if you want to make a new recipe, you can just add, make a scratch meal. So here on the upper right side, you can just click on this. Okay. And you can add your own ingredients and then you can save it. So here, this is one of the recipes for example purpose. So here we have again used fruit milkshake. Okay, so you can just, if you can see over here, there is something called type text to find. So this is a database of all the food ingredients, right? So you can just type in the ingredients that you want. So I've added fruit A. So just type fruit A here and you just click on it and it will all show here below, right? So then fruit A, soya milk and oil. Right? And then if you see the, up and down button here, so you just have to keep clicking on it till you get the goal. So you have the goal values, which has been already given here, and you have to reach the actual values over here. Okay. So you just adjust the amounts as per the, the goal that is set for this particular patient, right? So this is much easier compared to the manual calculation. So there are additional features as well. So if you want to, edit the exchange list, which is already given in the database, you can do so. There is an option for that, where you can add your own country's branded food items and add the nutritive values as well. Okay. You can also add medications and supplements into the program. So there are two support features for assisting the users in the use of the program. So there is a frequently asked questions tab, which is linked to provide the guidance. There's also a helpline which allows the user to submit the question and receive a response within 24 hours. And this is a free online application. So we really appreciate Ms. Beth for developing this. So it's easy for all the dietitians to use. But as Dr. Nathan said, it's always better to learn the manual calculations first to understand the concept of ketogenic diet before proceeding with the keto calculator. Okay. So thank you once again.
So I think that was really, now all you dietitians will say, wow, now we can do it. No problem. Very easy. So it is very easy once you've learned the nuances of the diet. You can add any food that's not in the list, which is your local foods, because you will be having foods which are not used in the West. We've got a number of them which are not used in the West, and we've already put that into our database. So you can have a database of your own foods which are available. And it's always better to use natural foods rather than using any of the commercially prepared. I don't think we give our patients commercially prepared foods, maybe 5% of them. 95% would be using all natural foods, because after all, the commercially prepared foods have got their own limitations. Any questions you want to ask here? Because after this, Dr. Hue says we all need coffee.
I will translate her question for you. If you have a patient with undernutrition, when you use the energy requirement of about 75%, whether this patient will have low energy for the the development for the undernutrition, because in a child with undernutrition, we have to increase the energy. So if still the percentage of 75 is fixed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You understand the question?
Yes. It's for undernutrition you're talking about? If the patient is underweight?
Yes.
Okay. If the patient is underweight, so that's the reason, if you saw my slide earlier, we always take the baseline recall of what the patient is already eating, right? And we do this to assess the patient's appetite and the daily calorie consumption. So we try to keep it as near to the the baseline calorie value for the actual keto calories as well. And 75% of RDA, at least at our center, we have seen if the patient is underweight, we tend to, in the fine-tuning part, I'll be explaining that, we tend to increase the calories as well if it is required. So 75% is the reference, but we have to adjust it according to the patient's needs mainly. So we want to bring them to the ideal body weight. Whether the patient is underweight or overweight, we have to bring them to the ideal body weight mainly.
Okay. Cái câu trả lời của cô á, là tùy vào cái tình trạng mà dinh dưỡng của bệnh nhân, cái tình trạng dinh dưỡng nền của bệnh nhân, thì mình có thể thay đổi được cái tỷ số đó, cái số phần trăm đó, và quan trọng là cố gắng đưa bệnh nhân về cái cân nặng lý tưởng của bệnh nhân để đưa về cân nặng lý tưởng.
Yeah, can I add something here? So calorie restriction on its own has anti-seizure and anti-epileptogenic effect. Calorie restriction only. Even if you don't put them on a ketogenic diet, just do a calorie restriction. It has an effect of its own. So that's why we are using both. Yes. Obviously, if you're underweight, we're going to increase your calories. If you're overweight, you're going to cut the calories of the 75% RDA. 75% RDA is basically to have a calorie restricted diet because it has an entirely different mode of action from the ketones.
I think I'm loud. I just want, it's maybe a comment or a question. We can just discuss this later. Basically RDA means recommended dietary allowance, and that's all for healthy individuals who are moving around.
Yes.
And most of our epilepsy patients may not be that active.
Yeah.
Right. So cutting down on calories there doesn't really affect their growth, I would say, if at all we have to.
Yes.
And even otherwise, whatever doctor said, Dr. Nathan, that cutting down on calories as such as a anti-epileptic effect, that could be another benefit. So I think and as such RDAs, they are meant for healthy individuals and they are slightly exaggerated also. So bringing it down to about 75% really would not affect the growth at all.
And anyway, you're going to be doing the height and weight every month.
Yeah.
So if you find that this child's height is not increasing well, the weight is not, you can just move up the calories or you can move up the protein. So it's up to you to fine tune the diet. So it's not like this is, once you begin a diet, you maintain the thing for the rest of the course. There's not 3 years, same thing. No, you got to go on every month deciding what should be the calories, what should be the ratio, and what should be the proteins. And that depends on the height, the weight, and of course, you're going to do the serum, the proteins, and look at the albumin.
Yes.
Because if you find that that's going down, that means you got to give the child more of protein. So it's not a one-time thing. You got to every month look at the calculation again. And because of the keto calculator, it's easy. In that, you just change the calories, change the ratio, change your protein, and it will automatically do the rest of the calculation.
Giờ cho em hỏi là cái syncytol của những bé sơ sinh á, mình chưa được có ăn gì, chỉ uống sữa mẹ thôi. Thì trong cái cơ chế là mình hạn chế cái carbon trong đó, thì cái sữa đó mình có cái kinh nghiệm nào trong cái quá trình cho ăn của cái syncytol của trẻ sơ sinh? Cái nữa là cho em hỏi là hồi nãy ở trên báo cáo là có nói về cái tinh bột ở cái mì á, thì ở đây là carbon hydrate không và cái đạm của bằng không, thì thường là mình tính trong cái năng lượng của nó thì chỉ là vậy, là chỉ là lipid. Thì em cho em hỏi là cái mì này là mặc định không tính carbon, hay là cái mì này đã qua chế biến và cái carbon đó không có tính vô keto? Và cái nữa là cho em hỏi là trong cái chế độ ăn keto á, thì cái đường của trái cây nó có ảnh hưởng gì
carbon trong đối với cái bệnh nhân keto hay không? Với lại thường trước giờ cái hạn chế của keto mà mình đang tính ở đây là mình không được tiếp cận những cái thực phẩm lỏng mà đã chế biến như là sữa đậu nành này nọ. Thì trong carbon trong sữa đậu nành của mình vẫn tính có carbon, thì ở đây trong hoàn toàn không có. Tại vì mình trong cái hạn chế của chế độ ăn sinh keton là cái hạn chế đạm và carbon, mà những cái thực phẩm này người ta đã không có hết thì rất là dễ dàng so với mình đang tính bây giờ. Thì cho em hỏi là những cái kinh nghiệm đó hay là những thực phẩm đó là tính carbon như thế nào?
She has three questions for you. The first, in the neonate.
Okay.
Okay. In the neonate who have the breastfeeding 100%.
Yes.
When we start a ketogenic diet in the neonate, you have the experience to use. It's the first question.
Right.
The second question, he asked about the noodle. The noodle, free carbohydrate and protein. But is the noodle is modified for this purpose, because in the natural noodle have the carbohydrate.
Yes.
The third question is about the fruit sugar, how it's affected in the ketogenic diet, and in some liquid formula like soy milk. It have carbohydrate, but how we calculate the carbohydrate in this formula?
The last question about the carbohydrate in which soy? Soy. Okay. Got it. So the first question is about the breastfeeding. So mainly in case of neonates, mainly what we have seen at our center is they come to us when they've already reached mostly 6 months of age, because like we know that we start ketogenic diet for refractory epilepsy, right? So by then they're already been on 2 or 3 anti-seizure medications. So that time period is already done. And when we have to, if we have to give breast milk, then we either ask the mother to express the milk, we calculate it, and we let them know how much amount they need to give. The second, because many a times what the mothers tell us is that for comfort feeding at night time mainly, the patient, the children want to breastfeed, right? So in such situations, what we say is give 80% of the calculated ketogenic diet, and the 20% they can breastfeed. So since they're already full, they won't drink too much of breast milk. Okay, so I hope that answers your first question. What was the second question, please? About noodles. Okay. So so this shirataki noodles, or the miracle rice noodles, made from konjac flour. So we all know, you can even do research on this. It has negligible or even no digestible carbohydrates. So it is completely keto friendly, but it's you can check whether it's available in Vietnam. For us, those who are affluent can really afford, they can go for it, because it's pretty expensive. We have to source it from US, and there is exorbitant shipping charges involved. So only those who are affluent, they can go for it. But yes, it's completely keto friendly. Those who have used it, we have seen that there has been no spike in the glucose. They maintain optimal, ketone levels for them. And third question is about the soy products, right? Fruits. Okay, fruits. So fruits mainly we do, if you saw, we always do the calculation, the total carbohydrate calculation. So we consider the carbohydrate content of the fruits, and always we give as per the values that we have calculated. So we stay within that range. So again, we're always monitoring the urine ketone levels at all times. And if sometimes we need to, we also do the blood glucose check to make sure that the child is within the appropriate range. Okay. Yeah, so soy milk, which I had mentioned, it again has no digestible carbohydrates. So we do not consider the carbohydrate content of the soy milk. Many soya milk packets, they do mention the carbohydrate level in the label, but we do not consider that when we do the calculation, because we know that it is not digested mainly. Okay.
Cái câu thứ nhất á, là ở trẻ sơ sinh á, mà xài chế độ ăn sinh keton á. Chị nghe rồi luôn không? Nghe rồi. Hỏi
I'll just put forward to some of the points. Someone they asked me earlier about what MCT. How do you give an MCT ketogenic diet? So there's one practical problem with MCT ketogenic diet. You cannot begin with the total amount of MCT from the first day. So we normally begin with, depending on the age, we begin with 2 ml per meal, sometimes even just 1 ml per meal, and then gradually increase it. MCT is odorless and tasteless, so it's like water. So you can mix it with any of the foods. You cannot heat it. You cannot cook in it. So you have to add it into the food after it is warm or cold. So gradually you increase it. You can go up to an MCT of 60% of your oil content. So if your oil is say 80, you can give 48 of MCT and the rest will be oil. Then the next was about the breast milk. Why is the breast milk so good for the children, infants? Because it has MCT. And that MCT is the one which makes your brain grow rapidly and has effect on the synaptic reorganization. And that MCT remains, even if the child is fed for only 8 months, the effect remains up to 2 to 3 years. So therefore, please don't withdraw the breast milk. The MAD, the modified Atkins, what we have done is very simple. And I think some of the other centers are doing that. We have a standard cup. So we keep a standard cup, which is about that big. And then we have measured different vegetables and fruits in that with a 2.5 or 5 gram exchange value. So all we tell them is, okay, you are allowed 10 grams, means 4 cups of 2.5. So you can either take that, but you cannot, another important point, this is something that many of them do. They'll take all the 4 at one time. You can't do that. If you're going to take your 10 grams, you have to divide it into 4. 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. And we don't use 10. We go up to 20. And then we would bring it down if we find that the patient is not doing too well. Now, again, that depends upon the age, the weight, etc. So the fourth I wanted to put is patient is individual. So you cannot use the same formula, the same ratio for everyone. I mean, there are kids who are on a 1:1 diet are absolutely okay. There are no seizures at all. We have some who are on 0.8:1. Now, the same thing you find in the medication. You'll find that medication, some of them you give a very low medication and the seizures stop. And sometimes you have to go up to a very high dose per kg. So what is the ketogenic diet? It's not a diet. It's a therapy. And the ketone is an anti-epileptic medication. So some will respond at a very low level and some may require a higher level. I think 1 or 2 of the others will come later. And the last is about the surgery. I wanted to point this out to you. Time and time again, we are seeing this. People are seeing something and they're let's take it out. But do you know that is the one? Is that the one which is causing the epilepsy? So you have to have in your mind, first, look at that EEG, do multiple EEGs. Where is this focus coming from? After you decide that, then you decide that is the MRI compatible. You see a mass over there. The mass is not going to give you seizures. The mass is electrically inactive. It's the cells around which are going to give you the seizure. So how do you know? Is it this cell? Is it this cell? Is it this cell? Is it below? Then you do your, put in your needle, electrodes, etc., etc. And in that there's a big problem. If you go into the wrong area and you put an electrode somewhere, electricity is transmitted. So you have no idea whether this is a transmitted focus or is it the real focus. And these children will have no seizures for 2, 3, 4 months. After 6 months, they come back again. So be very careful of epilepsy surgery, especially in a child. And of course, the last thing is it is irreversible. What you take out, you can't put back. So I always would advise, even if you find a lesion, first go for the diet. If the diet is going to do the trick, don't go in for the surgery. You can go wrong many times. And we've seen this time and time again. They come back. And who sees them when they come back? We, not the surgeon. So he writes everywhere, successful. What success? You got it for a few months. So therefore, be very careful about the surgery. I would like Sumita, because she does a lot of epilepsy surgery. So what do you find? How many come back?
I think it all depends on this. It also depends on the surgeon's technical skills. I think of late we didn't have very good outcomes, but I think from about 2014 up to about 2018, we did about 140 to 150 surgery, but a very skillful surgeon. The outcomes were pretty good, 70 to 80% seizure freedom. But I didn't present the case, but I think, yes, we've made mistakes with localization for sure. And when the technical abilities are not very good, incomplete dissection, then seizures flare. And in the acute period, I said the diet works fantastically, like 2-3 days, no seizure. So I argue that it's the diet, whereas the other neurologist said, nah, this is just seizures coming down. But yeah, I think you have to be very certain with what you're cutting. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add, I want to share something about the neonate, the breastfeeding just now. Okay, actually currently we have one patient who are 1 month old, and previously he's on breastfeeding, direct feeding, but the mother also expressed breast milk. So what we do, we ask the mother during the assessment how much milk that she can get. For one session EBM, express breast milk, is about like a 4 ounce, 5 ounce. And then we mix the breast milk with ketogenic, the formula, the higher ratio, 3:1 ratio, 4:1 ratio. For example, 60 ml ketonia, the one that we bring in from Korea, plus 30 ml or 1 ounce of breast milk will give you 2:1 ratio. At 2:1 ratio, this patient doing very, very well. She's free for now. And actually doable. And if the patient not satisfied, because previously he is a direct breastfeeding, after the mother expressed the breast milk, he get about 4 to 5 ounce. We allow the mother to direct feeding the baby. It won't be much. Yeah, that's our practice.
I have 2 comments. The one for breastfeeding, for us, we just give 75% of the diet in formula. Then after the baby finish this bottle, she continue direct breastfeeding. She will not take so much each time. And we have a trial 1 week. Then we have the ketones in blood and in urine, and we compare. If it's, and we monitor, it may be less, 65%, maybe more, 85%. So direct breastfeeding, because of the skin contact, is very important. And also for the breast to continue, it's very important. So we do that. For surgery, I think, as Sumita said, it is the lesion. Where is the lesion? And to allocate the area around the lesion, which is epileptogenic, sometimes it's big enough, they cannot remove it all. Epilepsy surgery improved in Egypt so much in the last 3 years, a lot of patients. But for localization, again, is problematic. We have some to have seizures after surgery. Usually, I recommend to continue steroids for 6 months after the surgery. It's very good. But sometimes the surgeon, when he said to me, no, I cannot get all the allocated region. I take a small part. He helps. So we can combine surgery and keto. So I have a patient has 3 options. She has surgery, she has VNS, and she has keto. The three together. So tailored again according to your patient. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ominia. And now we have to 10 minutes for break time. We have to come back 3 p.m. please. mình có 10 phút để nghỉ giải lao. Quý thầy cô, chúng ta sẽ ra ngoài để thư giãn chút xíu ha. Dạ, chúng ta quay lại vào lúc 3 giờ. Chúng ta sẽ quay lại với buổi chiều. Chúng ta sẽ còn 3 bài báo cáo nữa cho cái phần chương trình đào tạo về chế độ ăn sinh ceton trong chương trình hội thảo ngày hôm nay. Kính mời quý thầy cô, các anh chị và các bạn chúng ta ổn định chỗ ngồi để chúng ta bắt đầu cái phiên thứ 2 của buổi chiều. Now I would like to introduce Professor Janaknathan. He will present to us his presentation về practical effect. Monitoring side effect and withdrawal ketogenic diet. I think this is very, very interesting topic for us. Yeah. Please, your presentation, Professor Zana.
Thank you. So, we'll first begin with the side effects. Actually, I think we've dealt with many of these. Constipation is one of the most common because of the bulk becoming less, because of the fiber becoming less, and that's the reason. So what do we do? The first and most important is you can add psyllium husk. I do not know, Dr. Hue, what is psyllium husk in Vietnam called? Psyllium husk. It's called isabgol. Google. Psyllium husk. Just Google it on Vietnam. So psyllium husk is one of the best because it is a bulk laxative, so it doesn't have any side effects, can be used for a long period of time. So psyllium husk also has the advantage of being fiber and therefore increasing the production of short-chain fatty acids like butyric acid. Now, short-chain fatty acids are very important for the patient, not just for the epilepsy, but also for the well-being of the patient. And that comes when you give them psyllium husk. So that's how we fix it. Add more fiber. And therefore, for this, we have a special powder which we have made, which has psyllium husk and soy. And we call that as the Keto Wonder Powder. The other is to drink lemon water and apple cider. That's the second. The third is that you should exercise. So if you exercise, your chances of constipation become less. So that's very important. Mindful eating. Don't try and feed the child too fast. At the same time, most of the children who are on the diet, they take too long to eat. That parents would tell us that the child can take 1 to 1.5 hours to eat. So what we do is that child has to be trained. So we say, okay, feed for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, you take away the plate. Take away the plate. And then the child over a period of a few days will realize that, look, I got to finish my meal quickly. The growth retardation we've talked to you about. This has been seen in many of the centers. But if you can ensure adequate protein and the calories, you're not going to have this growth retardation. The hyperlipidemia. This has been overemphasized. Hyperlipidemia can come in the first few weeks or first few months and it will drop after some time. Number 2, mix your fats. If, like in India, they tend to have a lot of saturated fatty acids in the form of clarified butter. Clarified butter in India is called ghee. And it's supposed to be a very healthy food. But of course, nowadays it's being called unhealthy, but it is a healthy food. So if you have too much of saturated fatty acids, and we saw that in one of the patients, he was using saturated fatty acids in all 4 meals. And then we switched over, and that's the time we realized that if you have saturated fatty acid in 1 meal, a high MUFA oil in 2 meals like peanut oil, and one with a high PUFA like sunflower oil, then the chances of this hyperlipidemia is almost nil. Of course, we monitor the lipid levels every 3 months. But as I said, the 2 points in this, does the cholesterol really give rise to atherosclerosis, and I think not. It's not the only cause of atherosclerosis. So don't overemphasize that. So that is important. The next is the keto flu. Yes. Some of the kids, when they start off the diet, you will find that they, or even adults, kids, children, they will get something which is known, which is being called as a keto flu, because you can get a headache, you're irritable, you have difficulty in concentrating. It's like there's a fog in you. So these are the things. But the important are the one over here, are the sugar, the craving. They've been so used to eating. You know, these kids are used to eating sweets every day, in and out. So therefore, what we do is make sweets at home using a sugar-free sweetener. And you can make any sweet. So we have children for whom the parents make chocolates at home. They make sweets at home, which are extreme, which are very, very nice. They're all Indian sweets. And if it's homemade and according to the recipe we give, it's fine. So the child really doesn't have that. Muscle cramps, nausea is seen, but this keto flu will go away in a few days. So nothing to worry about that. Another thing is the electrolyte. In the first week, there can be a switch of electrolytes, and the potassium often falls in the first weeks. And therefore, we give them more electrolytes. We give water. The salt also can fall, and we give a little bit of salt in that. And magnesium. Magnesium is another thing which low, you can get this keto flu. So that is anyway checked initially in our battery of the biochemical tests. Renal stones, I haven't seen it even in one patient. Why? Because we give them potassium citrate all the time, from the first day to the last day. Everyone's urine is alkalinized. So if it is alkaline urine, you're not going to get these stones. Even whether they're on topiramate and zonisamide along with the diet. Even in them, you don't get it. And maintain a good urine output. So as we said now, children are not going to get, they can't measure the urine all the time. So make sure that the urine is pale yellow. If it is a dark yellow, something like this, the sunflower over here, then that means you're giving too little water. And that's the reason why you could get renal stones, dehydration. High ketosis. This we see fairly often. I don't know how often the others see it, but fairly often we see this. They go into high ketosis. And you do the urine ketone levels, right? Dr. Hue and Dr. Thu, I suppose you monitor the urine ketone. So if you find that the mother says, as soon as I dip it into the urine, it's black. It's very dark. Within 10 seconds, it gets dark. That's one of the warning signs that this child may be in high ketosis. Then the next will be, they won't feed. Their appetite will drop whenever they're in high ketosis. They will have nausea. And if it's even worse, then they'll go into vomiting. So that's the way it goes. If they have any of these symptoms with a high ketone, what do? Very simple. Orange juice. You give them 20, 30, 50 ml, depending upon the weight. Give them that much orange juice before every meal and tell the dietitian, drop the ratio. So if it was 2.5 and they're in high ketosis, drop it to 2.25. Within a few days, the whole thing will normalize. So not a very major problem. So give the sweet lime or the orange juice maybe 15, 20 minutes before the feed. And as soon, by the time they come to the feeding, the ketones would have dropped. Hyperactivity. Yeah, some of the kids, they have noticed this, especially when we give them MCT. When you give MCT with ketogenic diet, sometimes they become hyperactive. I have not understood why it is there, but they do, some of them. But that's temporary, it's mild, and it will go away. Again, this is temporary. Yeah, the same with the behavioral problems. Now, many of the behavioral problems are because of the change in the food. Some of them can't say, or they're so scared of the parents that they don't dare say, I'm not going to eat. So then they get into this aggressiveness, irritability, back answering, not listening to parents, becoming difficult children. So that is seen, and that requires a lot of counseling. Counseling from the parents, counseling from us. And with that, we should be able to. What the other way that we do it at times, this is very rarely we do it. We tell them, give all the sibs, this food. And then the whole thing will die out. When he sees the others eating the same food, he'll be fine. And we know that the ketogenic diet, even in a person who doesn't have epilepsy, is good. It's not that it's a bad diet or it's a diet which will cause any problem whatsoever. So then there are these innovative recipes. Now you can see this beautiful recipe. Now, any child would love to eat that, right? So you have a lot of mothers who make these innovative recipes, and then we give it to the others too. A sudden drop in ketones. This will be seen by some of you. And in the kids, all of a sudden, they are beautifully 4+ urine ketone, and then suddenly they come 0. It can mean only one of two things, that somehow inadvertently they have consumed more high carbohydrate. One of the reasons we have found is that the mother changes the brand of what she's giving. So there are brands of milks, there are brands of everything. And even though you say use milk, some may be high fat, some may be 0 fat. And if you change the whole thing, your whole ratio changes and it may drop. Or if they're in school, they go and eat from someone else's lunch. I share my meal with you, you give me a little of yours. And of course, if they cheat, that means they don't, on purpose, they want to eat something else and then they eat that. So that happens. So then what do we do? Yeah, of course, the counseling. At sometimes we've had to go to the extreme event of putting them on a carbohydrate washout diet. Now, we haven't done the initiation of the diet in a little more detail. The initiation of the diet can be by the fasting method, right? But the fasting method, initially, the child is lethargic, he is drowsy, and this happens in anyone who is on a fasting, water-only fasting. So we realized this around 1997, and then we switched the whole thing. Because why do you fast? I asked myself, why do I fast this child? I'm fasting the child in order to remove all the carbohydrate reserve from the liver. Because I know that until such time as the carbohydrate reserve from the liver is not removed, the liver is not going to take fat. So therefore, if I do the same thing by giving a carbohydrate-free diet, it's fine. So what do we do in the first few days? Let's say you're over here. So you give them in the morning an 2-egg omelette. In the afternoon, you give them some fried fish. In the evening, you give them fried chicken. And he's very happy. He gets all the things that you didn't allow him to eat for all these years. So the patient is happy, but where's the carb? There isn't any carbohydrate. Everything is fried. They got a lot of oil in it. You cut up all the pieces of the chicken and you shallow fry it so that it pulls in all the oil. And when you do that, you'll find that within almost the same time, maybe by the 3rd or 4th day, the child's urine ketone would have zoomed up from 0 to 3+ or 4+. So that's the way we do it. We call it a carbohydrate washout diet. The other way that some centers are now doing it is they begin with a lower ratio, say 1:1. So the child gets used to that. And within 2-3 days, they go to 1.5, then they go to 2, and then they go to 2.5. And then depending upon what is happening, then they would change the diet. So you are talking about, not initiation. Okay, so that's with the initiation. Anyone wants to ask me more about initiation? Because that's an important point. How to initiate the diet. So you have these 3 methods. Either you can do a fast, water only. You can do a carbohydrate washout diet. And even in a young infant, you can do it. In a child of, say, 6 months, 1 year, you can do it. Give him only natural soy milk with oil or butter put in that, but very important. The parent must change the flavor of the soy milk every time, or the child will get fed up of the same taste. So in India, we have at least 15 to 20 flavors. It's basically an essence of oil. So you don't have to worry about the carbohydrate there. And you get vanilla, you get chocolate, you get pineapple, you get orange, you get mango flavors, you get butterscotch flavors, all sorts of flavors. So every day the child gets a new type of milk. And within 2-3 days, he's reached the 4+ that he wanted. So what are the positive side effects of ketogenic diet? So we are all talking of side effects. Hyperactivity, most of them will become less once they're on this ketogenic diet. The attention span and concentration increases in most of them. The physical your development improves, the IQ and the cognition improves. So these are the positive side effects. And why do you withdraw the ketogenic diet? The first and most important, because the patient is seizure-free. And normally we wait for 2 to 4 years, but the first patient, remember I showed you one patient and I said he responded within a few weeks or within 1 or 2 weeks. We withdrew him after 1.5 years only because his seizure had stopped. Within 2.5 months, or by the 3rd month, the EEG had normalized. And I think there is... someone has asked online the question. My child had infantile spasms. We put him on the ketogenic diet. Within 1 week, the EEG is normalized. Within 1 week, your EEG is normalized. I don't think you'll have to use it for more than a year. You probably will be able to take him off the diet within a year. The other is, of course, the poor reduction of the seizures. That the parents want 100%. And if they get 80% or 70%, they're not happy. And then they say, no, we are going through so much difficulty. We have to prepare the meals specially for the child. I don't think we can spend so much time and we haven't got 100%. So they, in the beginning, when you counsel them, tell them that, look, it's not 100% cure. 100% will not get 100% cure. At the most, 3 out of 10 may be 100%. 2 out of them may be 99%, and 4 or 5 will be less than 90%. But for a parent whose child is having 20 and 30 major seizures a day, it's a lot. But they should understand that don't expect the moon. We can't do everything with this diet. If the reduction in seizures is less than 10%, the time duration usually quoted is 3 months. But I showed you that there are many who would, on the 5th or 6th month or the 8th or 9th month, they would go to more than 50%. And then within 1.5 to 2 years, they are 100% off the seizures. The adverse effects could be one of the withdrawal reasons, and that is incessant vomiting. The last two actually, the financial reasons. Ketogenic diet is more expensive than a normal diet because of the fat involved, and therefore fat is more expensive than, and of course, if you're using the commercial preparation, then it's much more expensive. The cultural and the family pressures. This is very important in those who are living in large joint families, and you have the grandmother especially. And she says, what are you doing to this child? This child must enjoy food, and you have cut out all the food that he loves. So that's one of the big problems. So once again, I must thank Dr. John Freeman and Millicent Kelly. I think I have learned so much from them, and of course, all my patients. And once again, come on to all of you. Are there any questions?
I see one question in online for you. Yes, this question is, ketogenic diet ratio 3:1 and 4:1 is difficult for patient to tolerate. Parents have vomiting and diarrhea. How
Vomiting and
diarrhea? Diarrhea.
diarrhea.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look at it this way. Vomiting and diarrhea in Vietnam. This is from Vietnam?
Yes, it's from Vietnam.
Okay. How good is your water? How safe is your water? And if you're not safe with your water, boil. We do this over there in India because our water is very unsafe.
Yeah.
Even the bottled water will have microbes.
Yeah.
So they are instructed every time only boiled water, and we tell them 15 to 20 minutes because I know it's all killed within 10 minutes. But if you tell them 10 minutes, after a month, it'll become 9. After 6 months, it'll be 5. And after another few months, it'll become 2-minute boiling. So boil your water for 15 to 20 minutes, cool it, and then use it. So the most common cause of diarrhea and vomiting in India is the viral infections. Not so much the bacteria, but this water has a lot of a virus in it. And the virus is not killed by the filtration methods. You have to boil it. So that's number one. Now, if you say that it's 3:1, not able to tolerate, I don't think you will get diarrhea with that. This is something I have not heard of. The vomiting can be there. Steatoria. Yeah. Okay. So look whether the diarrhea has got a lot of fat in it. So if the diarrhea is with fat, then maybe the child is not able to digest the fat. Then you give the child pancreatic enzymes. So we are using this. Any child who has steatoria, that means there's a lot of fat in the stools, we give them pancreatic enzymes 15 to 20 minutes before each meal. And it is solved with that. Most of them it will be solved. But I've never seen vomiting and diarrhea in a person who does not have infection. Most of them would have picked up some infection.
Would have led to the vomiting?
No, but then they're saying vomiting and diarrhea at the same time. If it is vomiting diarrhea at a time, that means there's some infection going. And the most common cause of infection is your water. So if your water is not safe, I would suggest they just boil the water every day for them. I mean, it's such a simple thing. Why take a chance? Because anytime the child gets any infection, the ketone will drop. Because infection means the body is going to put out more steroid in order to fight the infection. Steroid will immediately make the ketones drop. And therefore the seizures can recur.
Yes. That means in that case, we don't need to reduce ratio of ketogenic diet? Yes.
No, I don't think they need to take the child off the diet unless the vomiting and diarrhea is very severe. We don't do it at all. We just give the child an anti-vomiting. We make sure that they're getting enough electrolytes. And the other thing we do is we would give them a probiotic. And that will settle most of the things because we know that probiotics and the gut microbes have a great influence on epilepsy. I don't know, most of you will know it, that the microbes of the person with epilepsy is different from those who don't have epilepsy. The microbes in the drug-resistant epilepsy is different from those who have a sensitive epilepsy. So those who are going to respond to drugs, their microbes will be different. Those who are not going to respond to drugs, their microbes will be different. So you have to heal that gut. So how do we heal the gut? We heal the gut with 2 soups. The bone soup and the cruciferous vegetable soup. So the cruciferous vegetables are cauliflower, cabbage, bok choy, and broccoli, radish, and the Brussels sprouts. There's a whole list. If you go online, you'll find. So you give that first for a week, either bone soup or this. In Vietnam, everyone will have bone soup. They're all non-vegetarians. We have 50% vegetarians, so we have a problem. And then you give also the probiotic. So when you give the probiotic, there's another thing to look at. Every month, you change the probiotic. I think we have here, the professor of gastroenterology. So what I'm speaking, does it make sense?
Sincerely, in treating of Chagas syndrome in Vietnam, most of the patient ileostomy. Most of my patients have ileostomy.
Ileostomy, okay.
And therefore, for patients with ileostomy, there are no problem with probiotic disorder. And therefore, I don't have to change the probiotics. However, in all the cases in which if the ileostomy after treatment is conducted, I think that probiotic could be better.
Okay.
However, because I think that the most appropriate for them is to treat them by a natural way with many natural products, such as Vietnam. There are some things look like kimchi.
And kimchi.
Or yaourt.
What about kimchi?
And chocolates.
Okay.
Maybe bad. Maybe also.
Yeah, the prebiotics. So we now come to, I think we're coming to the end. The fine-tuning of the ketogenic diet. So you've begun the ketogenic diet, how to optimize the ketogenic diet in order to reach your goal. What is your goal? Reduction in the seizures or control of the seizures entirely. So how to fine-tune that diet if it's not working in the usual way, and you begin it and then you don't know, it's not improved. The child has not got okay. So Sonal, who has a lot of experience in that, will talk to you on that.
Hello once again. So I'll now be speaking on follow-up, fine-tuning and weaning of ketogenic diet. We first start with follow-up. So it is essential for the patient follow-up to be done by a KD team of doctor and dietitian every month for better KD efficacy and patient compliance. So we first check the patient's anthropometric measurements, that is the height and the weight, and using this we calculate the ideal body weight and also to check the BMI growth trends. We do the urine ketone check in the clinic during follow-up. This is to cross-check the patient's keto diastics. So we ask the patient to get their keto diastics to the clinic, and we also keep a spare keto diastics at our clinic, and then we match the colors to see whether they are checking it accurately or not. We sometimes do the blood ketone check at our center. This is especially useful when the urine ketone levels are optimal, that is 4+, but you don't see a good seizure control. So when we do the blood ketone check, we sometimes see that the blood ketone levels are pretty low, and then we do the fine-tuning as per that. We ask the patient to maintain a urine ketone chart where they note the urine ketone levels every day, and they get this chart at the time of the follow-up every month. So this helps to ascertain the urine ketone levels intra-day and intra-month. Similarly, we also ask them to maintain a seizure chart where they note down the seizure frequency on a daily basis, and this helps to assess the seizure frequency as compared to the previous month. We also do a video EEG baseline, and then it is repeated every 3 months in the first year and every 6 months after that. So this helps to check the epileptic activity in the EEG, which is often silent or at times associated with clinical seizures, which in turn may be obvious or subtle. The urine routine test is also done to check for crystals, RBCs, and urine calcium to creatinine ratio. So this is done on every month basis. The blood test is again done baseline and then repeated every 3 months in the first year and every 6 months after that to check for any deficiencies or abnormalities in blood parameters. And if we see any of this, we treat it with appropriate supplementations. We also check for side effects and symptoms like drowsiness, nausea and vomiting, constipation or dehydration, and we treat it with appropriate medications. We have also seen certain less common side effects like changes in sleep and behavior patterns, temporary memory loss when there is increased seizure frequency. And once the ketones are optimal and the seizure frequency goes down, then all these symptoms also subside. Last, we also get the recipes feedback. This is to maintain the patient compliance to the ketogenic diet. So what are the problems faced during ketogenic diet and how do we tackle them? So first is problems with the weighing scale. So we know that in the classical ketogenic diet, we have to use a digital weighing scale for measuring the food ingredients. So sometimes the caregivers may unknowingly change the settings of the weighing scale. So they change the units from grams to ounces. Now, when I showed you the calculation, you must have seen that all the ingredient amounts were in grams. So when we give the diet chart to the patients, it is all mentioned in grams. But in case they change the units unknowingly to ounces, then that will be inaccurate, right? So this leads to alterations in the amount of food. They sometimes don't keep a spare weighing scale. So in emergency situations, the caregivers use approximate measurements of their own, which would be again inaccurate, and this leads to fall in ketosis. Also, for that reason, we ask them to get the weighing scale to the clinic during the follow-up period, and we try to calibrate it and see whether the weighing scale is working correctly or not. Sometimes they fail to get that, and we have to always emphasize to them to get it at each follow-up. Next is problems with weighing the food items. So many caregivers don't weigh the food items accurately. For example, weighing cooked vegetables and meat, which will obviously have moisture. So we always ask them to weigh it raw. And all these things we have to keep on emphasizing at each follow-up, at least at the initial stage. Next is problems with changing the brand. So example would be use of Sofit flavored soya milk. So I told you about Sofit earlier. That's a commonly used soya milk brand in India. So we always ask them to go for the natural version, which is unsweetened, but sometimes they unknowingly buy the flavored soya milk, which contains sugar, and that can lead to a drop in ketones. So what I tell my patients many times, if they are unable to understand, they just take a photograph of the food label and they can just send it to me via email or use of app like WhatsApp, and I can just check the amounts, the label, and then just give them the approval whether they should go ahead with it or not. Problems with substitutions of the ingredients in the recipes. So they may substitute it without our knowledge, and this leads to imbalance in the calculations. So example is, if in the recipe I've mentioned almonds, many caregivers, what they do is that they don't have almonds at home. So they don't understand the different nuts. They all categorize it in the same category mainly. So if they have cashew nut instead, they may use that. But we know that both of this has different nutritive values. So that will lead to alterations and a drop in ketones. So we have to tell them not to substitute anything. In case they want any changes, they have to let the dietitian know so that they can recalculate it and then send the recipes. Problems with list of vegetables and fruits. So in the calculation, session, I explained that we send the fruit and vegetable list to our caregivers, right? So if they don't read the exchange list properly, then that leads to choice of wrong ingredients. Problems with food taste. So many caregivers don't add any spices for savory preparations or even the sweeteners. I mentioned we, prescribe erythritol, monk fruit, and stevia for our patients. So if they don't use that, so despite having the freedom to use them freely, that leads to the use of unpalatable food. The patients may reject it, and then that leads to poor compliance. Okay, so at the time of the follow-up, we have to ask them questions all the time as to how they prepare the meals, what spices they use, whether they use any sweetener, how they can make modifications. So this is all to maintain the patient compliance. Next is problems with water intake. So I think Dr. Nathan already mentioned this, that we have to boil the water for 20 minutes. We always recommend that for all our patients, okay? Because if you don't do this, that results in infections and that will lead to a drop in ketones. Okay, so we always ask the patients to drink adequate amount of water. So we need the pale yellow color. I'm again mentioning this. We need pale yellow color urine. That means they're drinking adequate amount of water. And if it is, they're drinking less amount of water. So, and if you get concentrated urine, then again it will give you inaccurate ketone levels. Okay, so it will show you inaccurate high ketosis levels, which is not the case. And similarly, if excess water is consumed, that will dilute the urine, and again it will give you inaccurate low ketosis. Okay, so always you have to make sure that the urine color of the patient should be light yellow. Okay. Problems with ketodiastics. So we use ketodiastics for checking the urine ketones. So there is sometimes there's confusion with the color, and that leads to wrong readings. Sometimes the caregivers also leave the ketodiastics exposed to air, which leads to oxidation. Okay, and that leads to wrong readings. So for this reason, we ask them to get their ketodiastics to the clinic so that we can cross-check it with ours and see if the colors match. If the colors do not match, then we ask them to get a new ketodiastics bottle. Next, we proceed with fine-tuning of the KD. So the aim of the fine-tuning is first to achieve 4+ to 4++ urine ketones and to maintain the weight of the patient at the ideal body weight. So this ensures that there is seizure reduction or even a freedom and reduction in the use of the anti-seizure medications. So when we do the fine-tuning, we always have to make one change at a time, either in calories or in the ratio. Okay. And when you do this change, always wait for at least 15 to 30 days for stabilization of the urine ketone levels before you make the next change. What are the importance of 4+ urine ketone levels? So this is a question that we get regularly from our caregivers, that whether it should be checked on a daily basis, or whether if it is on a daily basis, should it be checked 4 times in a day. So this is a case study. So hypothetically, if the urine ketones are checked only one time, okay, that is in the morning, you can see in this chart, this is a patient urine ketone chart. So you can see if it's checked only in the morning, it is 4+, okay. And even then the fits are 5 to 10 per day. So one would conclude from this that the ketogenic diet is not working for this patient, right? But when it is actually done all 4 times, you can see that although the morning urine ketones are 4+, but in the afternoon, evening, and night time, the urine ketones are dropping. Okay, it's dropping to 3+, 2+, and even 1+, and that's the reason why the fits are still present. Okay, so we have to fine-tune the diet to achieve stable 4+ urine ketones. No, so I meant hypothetically if it is checked only once in a day. We don't check it once in a day, so I said hypothetical for that. Yes. This is actual patient chart, but I, just hit the afternoon, evening, and night. So that's why I said if it is hypothetically checked only once, mainly. Okay. Okay, so after the fine-tuning, the diet patient, you can see that the ketones were always at 4+, and with this, the fits reduced to 1 to 2 per day, and ultimately the patient was seizure-free and even now is seizure-free. Second case, if urine ketones are checked only randomly, okay, so if it is checked randomly, alternate days, then you can see that sometimes the ketones can be 4+, okay, whenever it is checked on a random basis. Even in this situation, you can see the fits are 8 per month. So the conclusion made would be that the KD is not working for this patient. But when it is actually checked on the days when they are not checking the ketones, you can see that the urine ketones are dropping to 2+ and 3+. Okay, and that's the reason why you can still see the fits. When you do the fine tuning, okay, then throughout the day, the patient is reaching 4+ to 4++ urine ketones. Okay, and with this, the seizures reduced by 70%, and ultimately the patient was seizure free. So now we come to the strict daily monitoring of urine ketones. So caregivers should check urine ketones 3 to 4 times in a day. So the advantages is that it is useful in fine-tuning of the ketogenic diet. It identifies cheating, and consistent urine ketones of 4+ gives better results compared to those who maintain lower urine ketones. This is a case study of one of our patients. where the patient had high ketosis and good seizure control. And when the patient cheated, it led to low urine ketones and the seizures increased. So this patient had myoclonic seizures of 210 per month. And the reason for the reoccurrence of the fit was the mother gave extra food to the child. So you can see that till 4 years on ketogenic diet, the patient was maintaining optimal 4+ urine ketones, and he was on 2:1 keto ratio, and the seizures had gone down to 0. So there was 100% seizure control. After 6 months, the mother started giving extra food. She started giving, carb-rich meals. So for that reason, the urine ketones started fluctuating, especially in the morning and the afternoon. And we were actually trying to taper the patient to less than 2:1 keto ratio because the child was doing so well. But then because of the cheating, the seizures increased to 4 in a month, and there was only 96.2% seizure control. After that, the mother was not checking the ketones 4 times a day. She became very lax and complacent. And you can see that the ketones further fluctuated all the time, and she was not even checking it at night. And because of this, we had to increase the keto ratio to 3:1. But in spite of that, the seizures further increased to 90 per month, and there was only 62.5% seizure control. So poor follow-up, poor compliance, and not checking the ketones 4 times a day was a result for the situation. Next case study is an example of poor maintenance of ketones and no seizure control. But when the patient reached 4+ throughout the day, there was 100% seizure control. So this was again a myoclonic case where the patient had 900 seizures in a month. And you can see when the patient was on ketogenic diet till 4 months, the ketones were not that good. It was dropping to 3+ and 2+. Very rarely it was being maintained at 4+. The patient was on a keto ratio of 2 to 2.2:1. But in spite of this, the seizures went down to 450 from 900. So there was still 50% seizure control. On 1 year on ketogenic diet, the keto ratio was increased to 2.5:1, and the urine ketones were much better. And there was very rare drop in ketones to 3+. And the seizures further reduced to 150 per month, and there was 83.3% seizure control. And 1.5 years on the ketogenic diet, the keto ratio was increased to 2.7:1, and the patient achieved optimal 4+ to 4+ urine ketones, and there was 100% seizure control in this case. So this is the urine ketone chart of the patient I just mentioned. Okay, so you can see till 4 months when there's 50% seizure control, there was more of 3+ and 2+, very, rare of 4+. At 1 year on KD, there's more of 4+ everywhere and very rare of 3+. So that's 83% seizure control here. And at 1.5 years, you can see there is no red seen anywhere. Okay, so there's all 4+. So there's 100% seizure control. What limits ketones? So inadequate or excessive calories, if the meals are spaced too far apart. So we always recommend that there should be less than 12 hours gap between the last meal and the first meal. Not consuming of all the meals, if there is vomiting or diarrhea. Inadvertently eating foods having hidden carbohydrates, and if the parents or patients are cheating and eating carb-rich meals. So the hidden carbohydrates, what we need to consider is toothpaste or mouthwash. So we recommend a sugar-free toothpaste at our center. Okay, we do not recommend mouthwash because many of the times it contains sugar and can lead to a drop in ketones. Sauces, salad dressings that you get in the market also contain sugar. So it's always very essential to read the ingredients. Chewing gum, even use of thickening agent in products like maltodextrin. So certain powders do contain that, and maltodextrin does lower the ketones, right? So you should always make sure that any of the products that you use should not have maltodextrin. Sweeteners, so like I said, we use sugar alcohols, erythritol, but again, maltitol, which is another sugar alcohol, is not keto friendly, which many people don't realize. And many of the products that you see in the market do contain maltitol, and they promote it as keto friendly, which is not the case. So that can spike the blood glucose and lower the ketones. Medications like cough syrups, dispersible tablets, sugar-coated tablets, so that can again contain sugar. So you have to be very careful regarding that. Low carb or no sugar added products. So I just give an example of the maltitol. So they may say it is no sugar added, but when actually it is not keto friendly. Changes in product formulation. So the previous formulations, like suppose if you're using any protein powders, which is initially sugar free, but they change the formulation and which may later not be keto friendly. So it's always very important to read the labels every time to ensure this doesn't happen. How to improve the ketones? So some patients benefit from higher levels of ketosis or increased blood ketone levels, while others at milder or lower levels. So rarely some may have an increase in seizure frequency with higher ketone levels and a better control of seizures with reducing the ketone levels. Ratios have to be adjusted to optimize the ketone levels and the diet efficacy if necessary. So sometimes we also use MCT oil, which could be gradually incorporated and titrated to enhance the ketosis. Monitoring of the free carnitine levels and initiating supplementation may increase the KD efficacy. And short periods of intermittent fasting may enhance ketosis and potentially increase the efficacy. The value of urine ketones versus blood ketones. So the urine ketones is affected by certain extraneous modalities. One is difficulty in collecting the urine from the diapers. So what we tell the mothers is that they can take a ball of cotton and place it inside the diaper. So when the child passes the urine, the cotton ball will absorb the urine and they just have to squeeze it out onto the keto diastics and check the urine ketone levels. Okay. Soiling of urine with stools, problems during menstruation. So in such periods, the adolescent girls may not be comfortable checking the urine ketone levels. Water binging, cheating, illness or fever. So high ketosis cannot be measured in the urine ketone levels. The highest that we can measure it is with the 4++ method. But it is blood ketone check is a much more accurate way to check the actual ketone levels. And some children may pass urine infrequently. So in such cases, it's difficult to check the urine ketones 4 times in a day. If the patient has constant 4+ urine ketones and the seizures have still not halted, probably it's because the blood ketones are low. So in this case, you have to increase the keto ratio and then the seizure halts and is in control. So there's no direct correlation between the urine ketones and the blood ketones. Blood ketone check is needed for more than average patients. So, and in some cases, if the blood ketones is very high, that is around 5 to 6 millimole per liter, and the seizures have increased, we have seen certain cases even at our center. In this case, you have to reduce the keto ratio, and with this, the seizures will also reduce accordingly. So the blood ketone is accurate measure of ketosis, but we know it's a painful procedure. It's an invasive procedure. It's pretty expensive. The test strips are pretty expensive. You get wrong results if the machine is defective, but it is very useful when the urine ketone is 4+, but the seizures are not controlled. So this is a study done by Donald et al. Okay, so here it was to check the urine ketone and blood ketone levels of the patients on ketogenic diet, which was measured simultaneously. So on changing the ratio and the calories to increase the blood ketones, the seizure control improved in 5 out of 11 patients. The conclusion was that there is a very wide variation between blood and urine ketone levels. And those with inadequate seizure control, but with good urine ketones, the blood ketone levels need to be measured to improve the efficacy of the ketogenic diet before calling it a failure. This case study was done at our center. Okay, this was to check the usefulness of the blood ketone levels. You can see that the patient had 4+ urine ketones throughout the time. Okay, but the seizures were not controlled. So even though the urine ketones were 4+, the seizure frequency was 34 per day. Right? But when we did the blood ketone check, we saw it was pretty low. It was just 1.3. So we started doing the fine tuning on the basis of the urine ketone levels. So whenever they came for a follow-up, we did the urine ketone check. And on that basis, we fine tuned the calories and the keto ratio. So post 1 month, we increased the keto ratio to 1.5:1. And with this, the blood ketone levels increased to 3.4 and the seizure frequency went down to 26 per day. After 2 months, we further increased the keto ratio to 1.8:1. The blood ketone levels increased to 4.8 and the seizure frequency further went down to 12 per day. And post 3 months, although the keto ratio was the same, the blood ketone levels slightly went down. But even with this, the seizure frequency further went down to 8 per day. So now the patient is completely seizure free. Okay. Fine-tuning the diet. Now, next is the meal timing. So we have to evaluate the timing of the patient's meals. Aim for no more than 3 hours gap between the meals. Aim for no more than 12 hours gap between the last and the first meal. If the ketones are low in the morning, consider a late night meal, and calories should be equally spread throughout the day. Now, how to initiate the diet for overweight patients? So you have to reduce 100 kilocalories from 75% of the RDA to achieve the desirable body weight. So it is very essential to burn the excess body fat, and we also have to consider the activity level of the child. In this case, normally we see that the child is accustomed to eating larger portion size. So we try to give less concentrated meals and more bulky food items. So we try to recommend to use more of group A vegetables and fruits, which has higher amount, which has lower amount of carbohydrates, and you get, larger portion size. Next is initiating diet for underweight patients. So here we have to increase 100 kilocalories from 75% of RDA to achieve desirable body weight. If less calories are given, the patient will burn body protein, that is muscles, which we do not really want. So we again here we have to consider the activity level of the child. And many underweight patients, sometimes they are unable to complete the meals. So in this case, it's very important to give them concentrated or energy-dense recipes, okay? And we try to use more of group B vegetables and fruits. So the amount will be lower and the child is able to complete the meals then. How do we choose between classical ketogenic diet and modified Atkins? So our first choice is always to go for ketogenic diet, but in some situations we prefer the modified Atkins. So if a patient is on classical KD and the child is finding it too restrictive, or the patient is feeling very hungry, goes to school or is going to college, or if the mother is, very busy and she has many kids. So in this case, we may try to shift the patient from classical KD to modified Atkins. But similarly, when the patient is on modified Atkins, and if we see insufficient Atkins response, or if there is low ketosis, or if they have not grasped the concept of the modified Atkins and they need more guidance, it's better to again shift them back to the ketogenic diet. So this is a study done by Eric Kossoff. Okay, so this was to see whether will seizure control improve by switching from the modified Atkins diet to the traditional ketogenic diet. So information from 27 patients was retrospectively taken who made the change from modified Atkins to ketogenic diet, and 10 patients had more than 10% additional seizure reduction, and with the KD or the modified Atkins, of which 5 became seizure free. The 5 children who did not improve on the modified Atkins failed to improve when transitioned to the KD, and there was high level of improvement in patients with myoclonic astatic epilepsy. So these results suggest that the KD probably represents a higher dose of dietary therapy than the modified Atkins diet, especially for those with myoclonic astatic epilepsy. What are the common dietitian mistakes during the fine-tuning period? So dietitian fixing ratios and calories without discussing with the neurologist. So, a good rapport with the doctor and the dietitian team is required. Both have their own roles to play in the KD efficacy and maintaining the compliance. Do not take into consideration the ideal body weight of the child. They do not realize that an overweight child needs less calories and an underweight child needs more calories. Many dietitians don't adjust the protein according to the height progression, and they may not give adequate supplements, which is needed. So we also use multivitamin and mineral supplements for our patients. We also use a calcium supplement for our patients, and if required, we use incarnitine for our patients. Dietitians do not realize that a change in brand like milk, cheese can result in disaster due to different nutritional values. So branded products have their own standardized values, so you have to go as the brands and not the generic, values mentioned, on Google. Okay. Parents are known to switch brands without informing their dietitian, so we have to counsel them. No change without permission. Okay. So the main thing is that the dietitian has to take a counseling session and explain at each follow-up, how to go about it, what mistakes they make, and you have to ask questions very minutely in this case. Parents cheat on behalf of the child, especially when child is well controlled for several months, so dietitian needs to question the caregivers very carefully. Common doctor mistakes during fine-tuning: medications not checked for sugar. Several sugar-containing medications still continued, so that will lead to a drop in ketones and the seizures are exacerbated. Medicines for current infections and illnesses are not checked. Pediatricians, even after being told not to give syrups containing sugar, dispersible and mouth-dissolving tablets, still prescribe these and tell the parents that the amount of sugar is very minute and will not result in urine ketone drop. But we have seen the disastrous results. Okay, this does happen sometimes. Next, we proceed with weaning and tapering of the ketogenic diet. So when do we wean and taper the patient of the KD? First is after seizures have totally stopped. The EEG should normalize and remain stable for 2 to 4 years. The patient and caregivers, if they're not willing to continue on ketogenic diet, we try to counsel them and make them understand the importance of staying on the KD. But if they don't want to follow it, then we gradually wean them off. And no adequate seizure control even after 3 months on ketogenic diet. So this is again a study done to see the optimal clinical management of children receiving the dietary therapies for epilepsy. So this is the updated recommendations. So Eric Kossoff and even Dr. Nathan and other neurologists and dietitians were part of this. So ketogenic diet should be used at least for a mean of 3 months in order to make a fair assessment of efficacy. Should seizures worsen for more than 1 to 2 weeks after starting the ketogenic diet, similar to anti-seizure medications, it should be discontinued immediately. In children with more than 50% seizure reduction, ketogenic diet is often discontinued after approximately 2 years. And children with more than 90% seizure reduction, and if the side effects are low, ketogenic diet can be continued for several years. So shorter durations may be appropriate for patients with infantile spasms and status epilepticus, but longer durations are necessary for GLUT1 and PDHD. Prior to ketogenic diet discontinuation, in seizure-free children, routine EEG should be it will be beneficial to counsel the patients regarding the recurrence risk. And although the classical KD can be discontinued abruptly in an emergency, it is more preferred to gradually wean them off over a period of several months, that is 1 to 3 months. So how do we do it at our center? So diet discontinuation should occur gradually and under continued supervision of the KD team to prevent the potential for rebound seizures. So for those on KD therapy for fewer than 3 months, the carbohydrate content can be increased gradually by 1 to 5 net carbohydrates per week, or by a 0.5 ratio decrease in diet per week till the ketosis is lost. For those on long-term therapy, this process should continue over the course of weeks to months. If seizures or other side effects occur with weaning the ketogenic diet, it should be resumed at the last point where it was effective. And once the ketosis is lost, and if the seizures remain stable with discontinuation, patients are encouraged to continue to adhere to an overall healthy diet, low in processed foods, specifically sugars, jaggery, and honey. So at our center, once we wean them off completely, we still recommend that the patient should not eat any simple sugars, jaggery, or honey for at least 1 year. Okay. So this is a very good paper where it discusses a lot on fine-tuning and weaning. So you can check it out. It's available on PubMed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonan, for your presentation. I see 2 questions from Vietnamese participants. I will translate to you. The first question, do you need to control how many calories you need to give for the baby at one time? At one time, that means I mean morning, afternoon, or something like this. I don't know exactly, but this is the question. The second question, please show us some food to limit or not use for the patient suffer epilepsy.
So the first question, we try to space the calories equally. So it is given on, so if it is 1000 kilocalories, suppose, so we divide it equally in the number of meals. So it will be 250 kilocalories every meal, mainly. That's how we give, calculate it for the patients. Second question was?
Please show some food to limit or not use to the patient suffer epilepsy.
So mainly you should stop all high carbohydrate foods. Okay, so you have to stop sugar, jaggery, honey. Okay, you also have to stop, even rice, whatever, noodles. All this is high in carbohydrates, high in flours. So you can use, certain things like almond flour, coconut flour. So that is a substitute that which you can use, even soya flour or soya products. So that's what we are using at our center. So you have to basically stop all high carbohydrate foods for the patients.
Thank you.
Yes.
So now that we've reached almost the end, how do we maximize the compliance of this and minimize the errors? Only then we will have better efficacy and our numbers will improve and the parents and the child will be happy. So Ritu Sudhakar is going to speak about this. She is a dietitian with many years of experience. She has many presentations at international conferences, and she is using this. She's using the modified Atkins more than the classical, but she has a long experience of how to maximize compliance.
Can I have my presentation, please? Can I have my presentation? Okay. Yeah. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Nathan on behalf of ILA to for having called me here for this, and Dr. Thu and Dr. Hue for their excellent hospitality, and taking the last talk in a long session can be very challenging, especially with sleepy and tired audience. And let me admit that even the speaker is slightly tired today. Okay. So there's no fun of, talking about fine tuning and doing all those things unless we can ensure that the patients are compliant with ketogenic diet. So what are the strategies that we can kind of follow? So this is a very common proverb. I'm sure all of you are aware that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So we're going to actually work on how can we actually prove this proverb wrong. So what is compliance and adherence? So adherence actually means that, up to what extent a person's behavior, that is like following medication, diet, or executing lifestyle changes, it corresponds with the recommendations from a healthcare provider. And these terms like adherence and compliance, they're often used interchangeably. And let me tell you that adherence is the single most important factor that we can actually modify because it, really determines the treatment outcome. So what are the barriers to dietary changes? Decision-making, social and cultural factors like, I think Dr. Omnia also mentioned that in a talk, perception and preferences, and even the cultural, environmental, and financial barriers, they determine efficacy or the compliance. So education and motivation. I'm sorry, it's, it appears to be slightly more, I would say, theoretical, but it's important that the patients or the caregivers, they understand the rationale for the required dietary changes. Unless you explain to them why a particular change is being made, they would not stick to it for long. And also there should be strategies that aim at motivating individuals to change their diet, because that would involve enhancing outcome expectations. I don't say that we should tell them about unrealistic outcomes, but yes, you have to tell them what do we expect out of, what are the perceived benefits from the dietary change that we are asking them to do. So the meal planning should be very realistic. The diet plan that we give should be easy to adhere to. It should be culturally and financially viable. It should have at least some foods that the patients like. The plan should be easy, not only for the patient to eat, but also for the individual or the caregiver to cook and procure. And we should definitely give lots of cooking tips, recipes, and some shortcut methods to save on time. So it should have more of what you can eat rather than what you cannot eat. And that has a lot of psychological benefit for the caregivers as well. Another very important factor is that there is a lot of availability of new foods in the market. And it's the responsibility of the ketogenic team or maybe the dietitian in particular to inform the patients and the caregivers about all the possible new foods in the market. Not that you have a patient whom you started on the diet 3 years ago and you do not give them updated information, right? So because depending upon the country of residence and availability online, there's so many food products available. So there should be enough information on commercially available foods, and that would actually, lead to more variety and improved compliance. So this is just few pictures that I tried to make the presentation slightly more appealing. Okay. Then support group interactions, they are very important, and interactions with others who are into the same, situation as you are. It can actually improve adherence to the changes that we are suggesting. So peers, it could be nutritionists and family. They can provide emotional support and also challenge negative outcomes or expectations regarding the change. And let me just add that AIKT clinic, that is Dr. Nathan's clinic, they have a WhatsApp group with the dietitian, checking for the content and of course replying to the patients. In my setting, I do not have a WhatsApp group with the patients, but yes, I do provide 24/7 WhatsApp support to all my patients, because they can message me with their queries whatsoever, and I try to reply at a maximum of 2 hours. So that really goes a long way in improving compliance. So this has already been discussed many times, that the different diets that help one get into ketosis. So at what levels can compliance be affected? It can be at the level of the patients, caregivers, and even dietitians. So as a patient, the main challenges that one comes across are rigidity, because this diet is definitely very rigid, has less variety of foods. To many patients, taste and palatability becomes an issue, and inability to include staples, like Sonal just mentioned, that we cannot include rice, noodles, breads, regular breads in this diet. So that's a very, very big issue. Then social issues and difficulty in eating out. This is something that really troubles all the patients. And when it comes to caregivers, it definitely, having the child on a ketogenic diet adds to their workload. There's a lot of cumbersome weighing of ingredients. It becomes time consuming to prepare special meals for the patient, for the child. Cost and affordability also matters to some. And also, at times, the patients, caregivers are not educated enough to be able to actually follow the instructions given to them by the dietitian. And the third and the most important resource that any ketogenic team would have is a dietitian. And even at the level of a dietitian, there can be challenges which lead to poor compliance, like non-availability of a dedicated keto dietitian or someone who doesn't have enough time to look after the requirements of the patients. And so in terms of variety, the number of recipes that she provides to the patients, demonstration of recipes, and to clear side effects to clear doubts on the side effects, or maybe whatever queries the patients have. So if the dietitian is not available to the patients, I wouldn't say 24/7, but very easily, then it definitely leads to a poor compliance in most of the patients. So can actually we improve the compliance? Yes, there are certain things that we can do to improve the compliance. And the first and the foremost thing, that is to add variety to the patient's diet. So there has to be increased number of recipes, keeping in mind the texture and the consistency that is suitable for that very particular patient. It could, it could be a variety of snacks, beverages, desserts, main meals. And then for school-going kids, one has to be, provided with snack or tiffin meals. Then there would be birthdays and eating outs, and special meals and recipes should be provided for that. Exchange lists are something that really come handy. So, giving good exchange lists to the patients can enable the caregivers to add variety to a similar recipe. Just saying that add apple to a particular recipe. Or if you say, okay, these are the 4 fruits that can be added. So she can make changes on her own. So the diets should emphasize on simplicity and practically. And of course, we should encourage families to eat together, so that that feeling of being different from others is not there. So some instructions like this can be given, how to use more fat in the diet, that, if they cut the pieces or they chop the pieces in small, food in small pieces and deep fry, this would help absorbing more fat. And obviously you could get better ketosis. Then the dietitian should tell the patient that if he or she has to eat egg, scrambled form of egg can eat more can hold more fat. Then you can use butter toffees for garnishing, and that this would hold good mainly for modified Atkins, I would say. So this is what a typical keto mother could look like, right? So time savers are something that really come handy, and we have to guide the mothers or the caregivers about how they could save time. And it's been seen that it's actually the initial weeks that cost an hour or two extra, but with the commitment and once the caregiver gets used to doing it, it only comes down to about half an hour in a week, which can be very easily done. So preparing and storing meals or parts of the meal in advance can save time, and this is what we have to emphasize. Then, we have to tell them time savers, like they could chop veggies and refrigerate in a Ziploc. They could make cream popsicles to be used over the whole week, just once, rather than doing it every day. And similarly, if there are, they could weigh the raw ingredients altogether. In many cultures or many families, mothers would be up maybe an hour before the other family members are up. So she could utilize that time, and she could weigh the ingredients, label them, put them in airtight containers or Ziplocs, and just put them in the refrigerator so that they can be, just taken out and cooked and served. That would save a lot of time. So, and for some working mothers, I think this comes handy, that she can even prepare some cold foods in the Ziploc and leave them in the fridge. So in case she's not available, the child can just, or maybe the father or someone else in the family can just take it out and feed the child. So this is again, adding to what I already said, that we can, planning a day's menu also helps, rather than planning, thinking of just an hour before every meal that what do I give now. So if it's planned beforehand, the mother or the caregiver can weigh all the foods for at least one day in a single go, or she can even prepare, multiple recipes, multiple servings of the same recipe together and separate them and keep in the refrigerator. So maybe she can give them over a week or as and when desired. So example would be like in case she has to bake a cake, right? And when you look at classic KD, it's very small amounts of ingredients. So rather than weighing all those ingredients for a single button cake, she could maybe multiply the recipe by 10 or 20, bake a cake and weigh the finished product and then keep it packed. So this would save a lot of time. Then meals on the go are something that we really need to tell the patients, because it's not something that we do for a week or 10 days. These ketogenic diet may go on for years, and you do not expect the patients to stay at home, patients or the family, to stay at home for years together. So they have to be, told that how they can make the diet portable, that is using storage containers. We have to tell them that it's easier to, carry cold food than hot food. And if at all they have to carry hot liquids, it has to be done in a thermos or a flask, and that they should have a cold pack to carry with them, cold meals, which can be, given to the child as and when required. And even while traveling, you can, these ready to drink supplements, like you have KetoCal, right? So they come very handy, because all that you need to carry is a powder, and you can mix it with water and administer to the patient or the child as and when you need. And then even these nuts, some handy nuts, macadamia nuts is naturally 4:1 food. So the child or the mother could carry those while traveling. And so if there's no food available, that becomes very handy. Similarly, for birthdays and indulgences, it's the dietitians who actually need to guide the parents as to how they could give all those goodies or the treats to the child. Because if they don't do that, the child will cheat at some point or the other. And creativity goes a long way in helping compliance. Because, simply putting an unappealing meal in front of the child, it can be very troublesome. So if it's the same meal, but, presented in a more creative manner, that really adds to the appetite and the child would like to have it. So basically, they could use flavor extracts like Dr. Nathan mentioned that we have about, it's like essence, right? It could be vanilla, mango. So adding that different essence to soya can make a different kind of a milk flavor every day. Similarly, you could have some herbs and spices, but we have to be wary that they can contain some small amount of carbohydrates. Then we can use food colors to make the food more appealing and attractive, and even shapes. Same food, if served in a different shape, would appear different to the patient. So being creative, careful, and planning in advance, it goes a long way in improving compliance. So, and what are the certain don'ts that we have to do to improve compliance? The foremost is, because see, there have been families that stopped going out altogether. So that is something we do not have to encourage, because they have to, we have to guide them as to how normally they should live like a normal, family. And there have been instances where a mother hired a home teacher just because she thought that if the child goes to school, he or she would cheat. So it's better to aim for inclusiveness for living as normally as possible, given that the diet can be very restrictive. So this is one of the publications in US, and this shows that, it actually emphasizes on the number of working hours that the dietitians put in for a ketogenic diet. How many dietitians do we have in the audience today? Not even one. Okay. But dietitian is definitely the most important resource, as I mentioned already. And it's dietitian who can actually make or break this diet. So she's the one who spends maximum time with the patient, beginning from initiation till culmination of the diet. She's the one who actually needs to be in constant contact with the patient. She's the one who works the most on follow-ups, phone calls, and provides WhatsApp support. She is the one who would actually work on the variety in ingredients, meal planning, and in increasing the number of recipes that are given to the patients, to teach food labels, and, so education, motivation, information on foods, behavior change. Whatsoever may be the factor, it's the dietitian who plays a role. So dietitian can actually prove that proverb wrong. So, and already discussed that usually lack of compliance is attributed to some side effects or psychosocial factors or the restrictiveness of the diet. And, usually there are very few reports of severe or fatal side effects. And I believe that if a physician and a dietitian, they can work together, and if they make few extra efforts, they can definitely increase patient compliance, which could in turn increase the efficacy of this dietary therapy. So to conclude, a diet plan is just as good as adherence to it is. So there's no point working on the diet plans unless we can improve or make sure that they are complied with. And education is very important, education of the caregivers and the parents. Then we have to let the patients understand the problem and even the solutions, why we have offered a particular solution to improve adherence. The meals should be realistic, simple, and recommendations that can be adhered to, and peer and family support. That is very important for good adherence. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Yes, please.
Special thanks to the outstanding. Special thanks to the outstanding performance today. let me introduce something about myself. I work in the nutrition and dietetics department, and I would like to ask the two questions to Dr. Baila from India and Dr. Sakina from Malaysia. You know, it can be seen that the percentage of the lipid in the total calories per each day is too high, and maybe it accounts for 90%. And I would like to know how can, because I'm into my whether the lipid in the per each serving size in the ketogenic diet and with the normal diet. Because as normal, I divided it into the 1/3 for saturated fat and 1/3 for monounsaturated fat, and the rest for the polyunsaturated fat. And because I appreciate about your performance about the design for the menu for the ketogenic diet. Yes. And I would like to ask about that. And another question about the protein. You know, the protein is just the tiny portion in the calories per day. Yes. And there is shared similarities between the origin from the protein calories. The origin of the protein is from animal or the non-animal or vegetable. Is balanced, or we put the top of the priority for the origin from the protein from animal, because in insurance we should provide the ferrous to form the red blood cells to them. Thank you very much.
Okay, so your first question was about the calories, mainly dividing the calories. Sorry? The type of fats used. How
can we divide the lipid in the
So we try to use the mixed oils mainly. So we use PUFA, MUFA and SFA, and we alternate it in each meal. So if the patient is on, say, 4 meals, so we will say 1 meal with the SFA, that is, we use clarified butter or butter. Then one would be with PUFA, so it can be either sunflower or safflower oil, and another 2 meals can be with the MUFA oils, that is groundnut or olive oil. Any of this can be used. So mainly this will ensure that the lipid levels are in control, mainly. Okay. Second was, so I'm sorry, what was the second question?
The second question is about the origin of the protein.
Okay. So we have both vegetarian patients and even those who eat meat, basically. So it all we consider the protein of both, but ideally vegetarian protein is, I would say the amount is fairly less compared to, like, if you're talking about vegetables and fruits, it hardly has any protein. So we try to use soy products. So soy it's a vegetarian product, so we can use that for the patients, and we can also use from animal origin. So beef, pork, chicken, fish. So that is more biologically available. The eggs mainly are more biologically available protein wise. So if it all depends on the patients, but both have fairly good amount of protein.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I think my practice is not that much different between Sonal's practice, but it's just that for the calorie distribution, it can be two-way. It could be two-way. If the mother is very busy, I just give the 1 day recipe, 1 day measurement. So you can cook for 1 day and divide by 3 meals. So the calorie distribution will be divided equally. For example, if 1,200 divided by 4 meals, it will give you about 300 calories per each meal. All right. If the parent or caretaker not working, or the mother is okay to measure food each meal, it's okay. So we give 1 meal. The menu is very individualized. 1 meal, the calculation is based on per meal. Yeah. For the protein, I think we use a lot of meat from the animal products. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sonal said that while maintaining the type of fats that we use, either you could do the way she told, right? That one meal in saturated fats, the other in monounsaturated, then third in maybe PUFA. Or you could have, if the patient's caregiver is intelligent enough to understand, you could even tell them that in the same recipe also, they could use variety of oils. Like, okay, if it's about 40 grams of oil or fat to be used, it could be 10% of a particular oil, 10% of the other one, and the remaining can be butter. So that because at least in India, there are many recipes that specially go well only with butter or clarified butter or, butter. So the patient would want definitely to add butter to the meals in each and every meal. So I tell them, okay, you add particular amount of the other oils and top it with little amount of butter or clarified butter in every meal. So that also works, right?
Okay, we're now about to end, but I think there's one point we've missed out is how do we withdraw medications on the ketogenic diet? So you can't withdraw medications as long as the seizures are still going on. You'll land up in a lot of problems. So what I do is I wait till at least 80 to 90% of the seizures are controlled and then start withdrawing one at a time and taper it off over a period of several weeks, each of them. So that's the first. And the next is if we make a change in the diet, either calories or the ratio, how long do we wait to make the next change? So you should normally wait for 2 to 3 weeks because metabolically it takes that much time for the urine ketone and the blood ketone to change. So the best is call them back only after a month. So they don't get excited and, oh, we haven't yet got 4+ ketones. We don't have it. Tell them it's going to take time. Please come only once a month and it will take time for it to improve. So I hope now at the end of this, there will be many more centers in Vietnam. And are there any online from Cambodia? So to those of our friends in Cambodia and in the other countries, I believe there are some in Egypt and Bahrain. To all of you, ketogenic diet is not a diet, it's a therapy. With ketogenic therapy, you get anti-epileptic, not anti-seizure medication called ketones. And ketones are probably the best anti-epileptic medication available. It takes a lot of art time, but I think it's worth it because we are dealing with patients who are very ill, who have many seizures and who have uncontrolled seizures. So I hope at the end of this, there will be many more centers which will come up. That is the entire reason why we have come so far and Omnia has come the furthest. So it's very good that all of you are here. It's very good that all of them are online. I hope you have enjoyed this. And if you have, you please send us a feedback. I think you could send the feedback on my email address. janak.nathan@gmail.com. That's janak.nathan@gmail.com. So then I will tell the ILAE that yes, it's really worthwhile our going around and having these workshops. Thank you. Thank all of you. And most important, I thank the organizers because they have had a tremendous, a lot of work they have put into this to make this successful. Thank you, Dr. Who?
Thank you so much.
Dr. Who?
Yeah.
Okay, she's translating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Janak Nathan, Professor Ominia, Dr. Ritu, Sonan, Sumita, and Samita, Sakina. Yeah. We're very happy with your interesting presentation. You show us many your experience about ketogenic diet. Before we start ketogenic diet maybe 3 years, but up to now, sometimes we feel very difficult But after our conference, maybe tomorrow, I think very easy when I can start ketogenic for my patient, and I hope my colleagues can do like me. One more I want to say thank to Dr. Nguyễn Thị Minh Thư, Dr. Bùi Hiếu Anh, Dr. Phạm Hoàng Bảo Trang help us to translate to Vietnamese participate. One more, I want to say thank to all of you follow us a long day with ketogenic diet. Now we have to close this conference, but I hope in the near future we have to organize next ketogenic diet conference. Thank you and see you again.